Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, January 13th, 2021. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Public Affairs Director for the Democracy Fund, former senior aide to Harry Reid, Adam Jentleson, author of Kill Switch, The Rise of the Modern Senate and the Crippling of American Democracy. Meanwhile, for the first time in history, the House impeaches a president for the second time. It's also looking increasingly likely that a Senate conviction could come before Biden's inauguration. This as more evidence builds that there was significant planning and possibly aid given to the insurrectionists by Republican lawmakers. In other harrowing news, 4,400 COVID deaths yesterday, setting a new record in this country. Biden reportedly will seek a bipartisan deal, claims he wants to avoid reconciliation to pass a major COVID relief bill. The Supreme Court fires its first shot since Amy Coney Barrett joined it in its renewed assault on Roe v. Wade. Biden to name Gary Gensler as the SEC chair, to many cheers of progressive critics of banks. Less so Samantha Power to USAID. And the former Michigan Governor Rick Snyder and others now indicted on criminal charges for the Flint water poisoning. The U.S. federal government executes its first woman in 70 years, the 11th execution performed since Trump removed the moratorium in July of this year. And in India, their court suspends the implementation of a widely protested set of farm laws. All this and more on today's program. Ladies and gentlemen, obviously a very historic day coming after, I guess we are now a week out from. It's sort of shocking to think that that was only a week ago from a historic and very disturbing attack on the Capitol. Joining me, as always today, Emma Vigeland. And Emma, one of the things that we are hearing more and more each day is there is increasing evidence that there was planning for this assault on the Capitol building, and that planning was aided by Republican lawmakers. This is a combination of video evidence that's emerging, of evidence that I guess allegations made by Democratic lawmakers, and sort of, I guess, circumstantial evidence that we will talk about, including Ayanna Pressley's office. When they barricaded in that office, the what is it, the panic buttons had been ripped out of the office.
Right. They don't know when that happened or how it did. But again, we're piecing all of these things together, as you said. And the FBI was made aware of the potential violence in these protests. The insurrectionists posting on the internet about how they were going in there as warriors and to take lives potentially, contradicting the FBI's public claims. I mean, shocking that the intelligence community might lie to the public.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible they're lying and possible they're just like sort of bureaucratic mess ups. I mean, they are, but I imagine there's a certain amount of CYA. I mean, clearly what happened is all up and down the chain of security. At the very least, there was just a sense of like, oh, these are just white Trump supporters, essentially.
Right.
And they're not going to do any harm to anybody. And whereas, of course, the reaction to something like BLM protests or other types of protests are far more militarized, if you will, and security minded. Now, with that said, there are something like 10,000 National Guards members who are essentially deploying to Washington, D.C. People have seen the images of National Guardsmen sleeping in the Capitol building, getting rest because they're going to be on duty now for days leading up to the inauguration. There is considerable concern that there could be other attacks, either in Washington, D.C. or other state capitals around the country. And, we're waiting to hear on that. Meanwhile, as we speak at 12:09 p.m. In the Capitol, we are en route to a vote to impeach the president. And there are reportedly close to a half dozen right now Republican congresspeople who will be voting with the Democrats to impeach Donald Trump. There could be more. There is already pushback against Lynn Cheney, who is been the most vocal member of the Republican caucus to want to impeach Trump. Now, of course, what we're seeing, of course, is a bunch of politics. There are Republicans who are deciding, many of them who, if they were already considered to be never Trumpers, this is their opportunity to sort of distance themselves from a party which gave birth to Donald Trump, which constructed an entire political project that essentially made it impossible for anybody within a Republican primary to beat Donald Trump. And so this is part of their political calculation. And I think it's really important that people are aware that and there's reportedly, and I think I saw a headline from the New York Times. Privately, Mitch McConnell is happy with the impeachment. Now, my definition of privately involves it not being a headline in the New York Times. In other words, if you and I, Emma, and the folks at home know that Mitch McConnell privately is happy that there's an impeachment, I've got news for everybody. He wants it to be known publicly. And this is part of his project to distance the Republican Party and himself from Donald Trump. It is very important that people maintain two thoughts in their mind. One, that it's good if we can get a conviction in the Senate of Donald Trump before Joe Biden gets in office, and some credit, or at least acknowledgement, that Mitch McConnell, needs to be involved in that process. And if it happens, has some responsibility and credit for that. But also be aware that, come on, this is politics. And Mitch McConnell, I don't know if there's a single person in the country who has been more enabling to Donald Trump than Mitch McConnell, starting back in October of 2016, when he said to Barack Obama, if you announce that there's interference by the Russians in this election, I'm going to make you pay a political price for it.
Well, I don't think there's one person more evil than Trump in this country than Mitch McConnell, if we're going to be real. McConnell's just smarter about it and more calculated. I mean, there's a number of things that could result from him clearly strategically leaking this to the New York Times. It's basically a trial balloon. He's trying to see how the public, how the press react. But there is clearly value in the Republicans distancing themselves from Trump at this point, because his approval ratings have tanked by 10 points in 7 days since the attack on the Capitol. Rightfully so. I think it's, according to Politico, their lowest approval rating, around 34% that they have recorded for Trump. He's always been kind of in the high 30s, low 40s. At the start, people were giving him a chance, maybe towards the 50-50 range, but this really tanked it. And he was already tanking after he lost because he wouldn't give it up. So he's toxic. He's radioactive at this point for them politically.
And I agree with you. I think Mitch McConnell is out there and he is trying to get a sense of just how dangerous it will be for his caucus members, perhaps some of them anyways, to vote, and I mean politically dangerous, to vote for a conviction in the Senate. And if he is trying to set up a test balloon to find out if he should, I imagine, in his mind, to assess whether he should bring the Senate back over the next couple of days, which he could do. And we will talk to Adam Jentleson about that very question in a moment or two, to bring back the Senate and have a vote to convict Donald Trump in the Senate. In the meantime, here is another story. And again, this is part of a theme. The idea that Democrats would allow and provide the vehicle for Republicans to be excused in this moment is, to me, just bad politics. Let's play this clip. This is a Democratic House member, Jason Crow, a Democrat from Colorado, essentially letting Republicans off the hook. Even if we are to take this at face value, we know the enormous amount of death threats that Congress people like AOC or Ilhan Omar get on a daily basis. And yet, and I have never heard of any charge that they are not doing something because of that, right, short of walking around in public. Yeah. B, the idea that a Republican would come out and say, even express sympathy. We know the hostility that Republicans have shown to them. Here's Jason Crow doing the work of Republicans here.
We heard earlier, Arnold Caldwell reporting that you guys are going to send over this article of impeachment immediately to the United States Senate once it's passed, perhaps seeing if they can trigger action even sooner. But I want to give you a chance to respond to the process argument you heard from Tom Cole there, saying that this is all being rushed. Obviously, time is of the essence. Are you concerned at all about some of the arguments that Congressman Cole was making?
No, I'm not. I think we have to be honest about what it is we're actually dealing with here. First of all, there's a number of things that are happening on the Republican side. A very small handful, I think, are kind of morally bankrupt individuals who have given in to these conspiracy theories and are too far gone to be redeemed. But the majority of them are actually paralyzed with fear. I had a lot of conversations with my Republican colleagues last night, and a couple of them broke down in tears talking to me and saying that they are afraid for their lives if they vote for this impeachment. My response was not to be unsympathetic, but welcome to the club. That's leadership. Our country is in a very challenging time. Many of us have felt that way for a long time because we've stood up for our democracy, and we expect them to do the same. But the process argument, we have a domestic terror threat that's being led and incited by the president. There are three substantial plots against the Capitol, against members of Congress. They're ongoing now in the weeks ahead and against the inauguration of the president. we have to do what's necessary to protect the American people.
Okay, so now, and to Crow's credit, at the very least, he was not so gentle with his Republican colleagues and not so gentle in presenting it to them. But this is the functional equivalent of, Chris Coons going on there and saying, in secret, a lot of the Republicans think that Joe Biden won the election. When you talk about moral bankruptcy, you don't need to be a leader. I'm sorry. It doesn't necessarily involve you being a leader to do what is right. That is what the definition of moral bankruptcy is. When you are afraid to simply do what is at hand. There are other Republicans who are doing this. If enough Republicans vote the idea that they're all going to be subject to being assassinated when this is, we have literally just witnessed their people, essentially, their voters, their party members crash the Capitol, and those folks were looking for Democratic congresspeople. And so,
and Mike Pence, I guess.
And Mike Pence,
but
I guess.
The comparison to Ilhan Omar and Ocasio-Cortez is so important because they do get regular death threats way, way more than these Republican lawmakers will ever get or dream of. And that doesn't stop them from legislative and electoral bravery on a consistent basis. But what's so funny about that is that, yes, they get death threats all the time. And now they're upset that the Frankenstein, the monster that they've created, which is this MAGA obsessive base of supporters that don't believe in anything except for what Trump says, they're upset that that will be turned on them. They were fine with it being turned on the progressive women in the House of color. That's okay with them, and them getting death threats on a quotidian regular basis, that's fine. But now that it affects them, okay, they have something to say about it. Cry behind the scenes to Democrats who then make that case for them.
Right.
In public.
I'm sorry. That's just not going to cut it. You
Nope.
got to do the right thing. And we're going to talk to Adam Jentleson about that dynamic in the Senate in just a moment. First, today's program sponsored by Grove Collaborative. This is the way that I make sure I get all of my cleaning supplies without the hassle. If you are looking for high quality, natural, non-toxic cleaners, sustainability, Grove Collaborative is the place to go. It's an online marketplace, and you get things like soap and like sponges and like bathroom cleaners, and I get little vegetable brushes. My big thing now is what I get from them is, and people know this, I don't like scents. I get the 7th generation. I get the dish liquid and the hand soap, no fragrance, completely fragrance free. I also, I get the Method bathroom cleaner stuff, antibacterial, all this stuff, non-toxic. That's what I like about it. You don't want my kids, I don't want the cats to get around this stuff. And the big thing that I did, particularly during the early days of COVID, is I bought like a bunch of refills. And they have dispensers, they have glass spray bottles, they have glass hand wash bottles. I went the whole hog on that. And so now I have like 4 or 5 of these bags, and I just refill it. It's super easy. And I have the app. And so for me, I just go on the app. You can go to grove.co. It's grove.co. You can join 2 million households who have trusted Grove Collaborative to make their homes healthier. Shipping is fast and free on your first order. You can also use their app. It's super easy. And that's the thing I think I really like about it. I like to go in, whatever it is, once a month.
You don't have to worry about it.
I don't worry about it. I don't think about it. Boom. I do a quick. You can make your home healthier and happier this new year for a limited time. When you go to grove.co/majority, you receive a free Mrs. Meyer's gift set plus some free shipping with your first order. That's a $30 value, but you have to use the special code. Go to Grove, grove.co/majority to get this exclusive offer. That's grove.co/majority. My little secret is that when there was a run on toilet paper, Grove had it, all the natural toilet paper.
Wow.
Yep. I probably should have told more people, but I was a little afraid.
Well, no, you were being protective.
All right. Want to welcome to the program the Public Affairs Director from Democracy Fund, former senior aide to Senator Harry Reid, the author of Kill Switch, The Rise of the Modern Senate and the Crippling of American Democracy, Adam Jentleson. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
So, Adam, I'm very excited to have you here, in particular on this day, and to some extent, I think what we anticipated when we booked you has changed just a little bit. But I want to talk about the filibuster and what you've written in the book and the history of the filibuster. It's fascinating. There was stuff in there, as much as I've been sort of decrying the filibuster for years, there was stuff in there I did not quite realize, and I found it a great read. And then obviously I want to talk about the report today that Joe Biden is going to supposedly eschew a reconciliation and try and get a bipartisan deal. But let's talk about this history of the filibuster. You basically break it down into two different eras. The first essentially coming from more or less around Reconstruction through to the Civil Rights Act. And give us a little bit of history of this. What I found amazing that I found from your book was that every deployment of the filibuster during that time, that some 80 years, I guess it was, more was to stop civil rights legislation.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we have a vague sense that the filibuster was associated with segregation, with efforts to stop civil rights. President Obama has called it a relic of the Jim Crow era. But, that's not just an association. That was its primary and exclusive purpose. It was, dating back to the beginning of the Senate, the filibuster was not part of the original Senate. The founders did not include it in the Senate. The Senate was a majority rule body and obstruction was looked down upon in the original Senate. And it was only after the intervention of John Calhoun in the middle of the 19th century that the filibuster really began to come into existence as we know it today. But it wasn't until the 20th century that the filibuster could be applied in the way we know it today, where it is used to raise the threshold to pass a bill from a simple majority to a supermajority. And the way it became honed in this method was by being used to block every civil rights bill that came before Congress from the end of Reconstruction in 1877 all the way through 1964, when Lyndon Johnson finally broke a Southern filibuster. So this wasn't incidental to the filibuster. This was how it was used. This was how Southern senators brought it into existence, and it became a normal part of Senate life because civil rights and the continued oppression of Black Americans was the only issue that provided enough motivation for senators to make this massive innovation and change the shape of the Senate.
I mean, this is, that was, and I want you to just talk a little bit about John Calhoun, because I think, we've some time ago, I guess now it was, we had Nancy McLean on to talk about democracy and change, which covers a lot about John Calhoun, but give us a sense of who this guy was and the context in which, because your book is The Crippling of American Democracy. And on some level, it was pretty lame. There was a certain, there was a lameness to the democracy as it, when it started, particularly when we're talking about the Senate, right? I mean, this is a the democratic body.
That's right. I mean, the Senate has always been an anti-democratic body. But I think the thing about that is that that's often used to overlook the fact that it was more democratic in its original conception than what it has become today. Even as a very deeply anti-democratic body, it was never supposed to be as anti-democratic as it is today. And John Calhoun was the originator of the trend that brought us to where we are today. James Madison, who's often cited as sort of the leading protector of minority rights among the founding fathers, never intended the Senate to have a filibuster, and he certainly never intended the Senate to have a supermajority threshold that almost every bill had to clear. The person who wanted it to be that way was John Calhoun. And so Calhoun was in the Senate starting in the 1830s. This was around the time Madison passed away. All of the other framers were dead. And Calhoun started to innovate the filibuster. He used it exclusively to advance the interest of slavery and to protect the planter class, who were his main benefactors as a senator from South Carolina. So he created the Senate where a minority could have a veto over everything the majority wanted to do. And he was explicit about this. He wrote a tract called A Disquisition on Government that was published right after he died. And he said that he didn't think the framers put in enough protections, and Calhoun wanted any minority faction in the country to be able to exercise veto over anything that passed. So the Senate basically for 200 years was caught in a battle between the Madisonian vision, where there was a lot of debate, but eventually a majority would have its way, and the Calhounian vision, where a minority could block anything that passed. It took about 200 years, but part of what the book argues is that Calhoun won. The Senate we see today, McConnell's Senate, is a Senate where a minority of 41 senators who can represent as little as 11% of the population can exercise veto power and block anything the majority wants to do. That is the culmination of John Calhoun's vision of the Senate.
We should be clear here that when we talk about a minority, particularly in the context of Calhoun, but really, I mean, until this day, the minority that we're talking about in blocking these things is really, I mean, the functionally the aristocracy, or at least the moneyed elite in this country, right? I mean, it's the moneyed, it's the powerful, it's those people who, the few who are ruling the many, and it is, and the idea of extending, I guess, American democracy to non-white people was sort of like the tip of the spear, as it were, in terms of like opening up and democratizing our country.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, we should be careful with our terminology here. When I say minority, I'm talking about minority in the sense of the top 1%. This is not about protecting vulnerable racial or ethnic minorities. You know, Calhoun, the great American historian Richard Hofstadter, called Calhoun the Marx of the master class. So Calhoun only deployed minority protections to protect the overdog, not the underdog. And what he saw was that this minority was losing out. You know, he was operating at a time when it was becoming increasingly obvious that America wanted to move away from slavery. They weren't, you know, incredibly enlightened, but the Northern economic model was proving dominant. Even, you know, in the antebellum times, there was a prevailing sense that slavery was a necessary evil. A lot of the argument that they made was that slavery was bad for white people because it debased them and taught them bad habits. So, you know, we're not exactly talking, you know, enlightened thought here, but nonetheless, slavery was losing out, and the slaveholding class was a minority. Calhoun needed to find a way to increase the protections and the power of the minority within our system of government. And in order to protect, you know, the planter class, the elite, the wealthy, and preserve the oppression of Black Americans, that is why he invented the filibuster.
So let's talk about the second era, I guess, of the filibuster, where sort of the that game that you just described on some level, that dynamic is sort of blown apart by the Civil Rights Act. And we move into sort of like phase 2 of trying to maintain that power by the elite, essentially, in a new era. Characterize that era for us.
Yeah, so this is fascinating. So, you know, much has been written about 1964 when Lyndon Johnson, as president, finally broke a Southern filibuster against civil rights. Now, to be clear, this was not the first time a civil rights bill had come before Congress. There were many civil rights bills that had come before Congress, like we talked about in the previous 80 years. This was the first time that they were finally able to break a Southern filibuster. Now, at the time, people thought maybe this is the end of the filibuster. Maybe the way that people saw it being used against civil rights will cause it to go away. Its association with segregation, its association with white supremacy will make it something senators don't want to use. But what happened against expectations was the opposite. It lost its association with segregation. It became sanitized and sort of entered the market like a generic drug. And when it entered the market, it found that demand was high because senators saw how powerful it had been against civil rights. And, you know, their issue might have been something else. It wasn't blocking civil rights. It was, you know, agriculture policy. But they knew that they could take the filibuster and wield it and create leverage for themselves in the same way the South had used it against civil rights. At the same time, a bunch of unintentional reforms started to make it much easier to use the filibuster. Before 1964, you had to use the filibuster in sort of the Jimmy Stewart style. You had to go to the floor. You had to actually physically be there, speak. You often coordinated with a bunch of other senators, and you could hold and you could block. You could hold the floor and block a bill for as long as you had the stamina to actually be there and talk. And this still had some connection to the idea of debate, of trying to make your case. Still some connection to the idea of the Senate. After the 60s, a bunch of innovations happened. I won't get too deep in the weeds about what they are, but basically they gave every senator the power to wage a filibuster, to raise the threshold for passing a bill from a majority to a supermajority by sending an email or making a phone call before the days of email. All they had to do was signal to the cloakroom and signal to the majority leader that they were going to wage a filibuster against a bill. And the Senate's workload was growing so much by this point, the expansion of the federal government caused the Senate to have a lot more to do, that the majority leaders, if they were warned that there was going to be a filibuster, they wouldn't bring the bill to the floor. And so it became much more user-friendly. And so the point where we're at today is that not only do senators not have to actually go to the floor to wage a filibuster, they don't ever have to explain themselves. They can send an email to the cloakroom, and by that one email, the threshold for passing a bill gets raised to 60 votes. We've come to accept that as normal, and that's why it's sort of standardly accepted that it takes 60 votes to pass anything in the Senate, but that is not the way it was meant to be, and it's actually a very recent development of the past few decades that's even the case at all.
And the problem with this dynamic where you can wage a filibuster with the ease of basically, getting a tea time, I guess, at a golf course, is that we just don't have we as in voters, as in constituents, don't have a sense of why certain bills aren't coming to the floor, or, we don't have a clear sense of who's advocating for what. Everything becomes much more opaque.
Right. I'm all for senators being able to delay a bill if they're going to go to the floor and explain themselves to the public. That is in line with Madison's view of the Senate, that if it was supposed to provide a platform for persuasion. So if you were, in the minority, if you were not, if you were outnumbered when a bill came to the floor, you could go there and make your case. And if you could use your powers of persuasion to persuade people to come over to your side, you could win the day. But the point was, when that was over, if debate had been exhausted, the vote should come up and a majority should rule. Right now, we're having senators enable a minority to block everything that passes the Senate without ever having to even explain themselves. And so if they're going to want to block something, they should have to come to the floor. They should have to make their case. If they succeed, great, more power to them. If they fail, then the majority should rule.
Now, I know at the end of your book, you provide some suggestions for reform, but let's just truncate that. Should we get rid of, and at this point, under Harry Reid, I think, you served with him. He got rid of, in face of McConnell's really unprecedented obstruction of cabinet members, of judicial picks. He orchestrated the removal of essentially the filibuster, the killing of the filibuster for judicial picks and for cabinet members. McConnell subsequently did it with Supreme Court picks. Should we get rid of the filibuster for legislation as well? It's obviously it's not something you can do unless you have at least 50 votes if you're Chuck Schumer. But would you recommend that, or should we just return to an era where the filibuster needs to be more mechanical, I guess?
I think that you should have reform that lowers the threshold to a majority. And there's different ways to do it. And Senator Tom Harkin has had a proposal where you sort of ratchet it down over time, where after a certain number of hours of debate, say 5 to 10 hours of debate, the threshold goes down from 60 to 55, then eventually gets down to 50. So I have no problem with, ideas like that keep the Senate to be a place where the minority will always have the ability to make their case and always have time to debate. But what has to happen is, as a standard matter of procedure, any bill that comes to the floor has to be able to arrive at a vote, a simple up or down vote, where it passes or fails. And so there's different ways to get there that I would support, but that has to be the end goal of reform. The reason is, if you flip it around, what you're doing by having a threshold of 60 is you're enabling a minority of as little as 41 senators, who again could represent as little as 11% of the American population. You're giving them the power to block everything. And so the goal of reform has to be to take away the minority's power to block anything the majority wants to do. Because in our era of polarized politics where one side succeeds by making the other side fail, the minority is not going to be able to resist the temptation to advance their political interests by making the party in power fail.
And in between that is make the minority that is obstructing legislation, make them pay some type of political price in terms of we need to justify this to the other 89% of the country as to why we're stopping this. So no $2,000 checks. Here's how why that's the case, et cetera, et cetera. All right. So, folks, I cannot recommend this book enough to understand the dynamic between what people perceive as sort of dry parliamentary procedure and our actual politics that take place as well as policy. So, all right, let's talk about at this point. Let's talk about the what's going on now. I mean, obviously. We've got impeachment in the House. It may go to the Senate for a conviction. Give me your take on Mitch McConnell's private musings that he is happy about impeachment, which we all just happen to know. Unmute.
Sorry about that. Yeah, it's his private musings that made their way into the New York Times. I'm not sure what to make of this. I mean, I'm reminded, in 2016, in February of 2016, there was a very similar story that reported that Republicans were preparing to abandon Trump. And it cited McConnell specifically saying he was planning to drop Trump like a hot rock if Trump won the nomination. So I think that there may be a little bit of reputation rehabilitation going on here. McConnell trying to make clear that he doesn't like Trump. He might also be, this might be a high fastball designed to keep Trump on his best behavior after that video yesterday where Trump came out and said, basically continuing to encourage violence. So this may be an attempt to make sure that Trump quietly leaves office on January 20th. If it's true that McConnell is actively considering voting to remove Trump and presumably bringing along the 17 senators he'd need to do so, I think you have to assume that that is because McConnell thinks it is in Republicans' interests to do so. He's been wanting to purge Trump from the party this whole time. I think, what people often forget is that the Tea Party was causing McConnell fits long before Trump even came on the scene. The rise of people like Ted Cruz, of Rand Paul, who McConnell opposed in the Republican primary for Senate in 2010. These people were driving him crazy and forcing his hand and forcing him into a lot of uncomfortable positions before Trump came along. So for a long time, McConnell has wanted to get rid of this wing of the party. I'm not sure that he will follow through because the reason he has not gone through with this sort of dramatic action in the past is that it would basically trigger a civil war, hopefully only figuratively, among the Republican Party. It may not yet be the case that it is better for Senate Republicans' political prospects to get rid of Trump. But if McConnell goes through with it, I think what we can safely assume is that McConnell has decided that it is in Senate Republicans' political interests to get rid of him.
Yeah, and I think your assessment is that is my sense as well. And we should also say that, McConnell could think it's in the best interest of Republicans, and he could be wrong. Right. Like he could miscalculate. And so I guess we'll have a better sense of that within the next 3 or 4 days. Good for Chuck Schumer, who I am generally very critical of, for basically calling McConnell's bluff. We'll see how explicit he does call McConnell's bluff on this, because this is all really about extracting a political price from the Republicans based upon what they do or do not do, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, look, I hope they vote to remove Trump from office. I would love to see him go out that way. But let's not give them too much credit here. We spent 5 years of the Republican Party aiding and abetting Trump as he caused enormous damage to this nation and hurt countless people. So, I hope they finally do the right thing, but it's about 4 years too late.
All right, so let's talk about this. And I think, to a certain extent, I hope this audience at this point has a broad understanding of reconciliation. We're going to have 3 bites at the apple in terms of reconciliation over the next 2 years, because you're only allowed 1 reconciliation bill per fiscal year, and it was not used in this current fiscal year. So there'll be 2 other fiscal years where a reconciliation bill is there. It can only be stuff that deals directly with the budget, and you only need 50 plus 1 really, I guess, 51 votes to pass. But Joe Biden has just announced that he is not going to pursue reconciliation, or at the very least, he's going to pursue a bipartisan bill. Give me your sense of that.
Yeah. So you're right about reconciliation. It does provide a sort of end run around the filibuster. The downside of it is that it has very tight restrictions on what can be included. I think when you talk about economic issues, there's a fair number of things that can be used to move through reconciliation. It does basically exclude any sort of democracy reforms and things like DC statehood, which I think are essential. So it could be used in the beginning to rush something through. It's a long, complicated story. You might end up having to go nuclear anyway if you use reconciliation, because if you run afoul of the rules, you're going to have to use the nuclear option to change them, even if you go through reconciliation. But it's a fine tool, to use as a stopgap while you try to do other things. But I think fundamentally, civil rights, democracy reforms, and DC statehood will probably end up forcing the issue on filibuster reform. As you said, Biden has said he's going to, at first, try to bring a COVID relief package to the floor under regular procedures, not using reconciliation. So that means you need 60 votes, just like we've been talking about here. I guess he's optimistic that he can get those 60 votes. If he can, the things that he's been talking about for the aid package sound great. It sounds robust. It's going to include $2,000 checks. If he can get 60 votes for that, more power to him. What I'm afraid of is that when they don't get 60 votes, that they will water down the package. And if they bring this package to the floor and they're unable to get 60 votes, they're going to face a decision point. And they can either decide to make the package weaker, or they can decide to reform the Senate rules and pass the stronger version of the package on a majority vote. That decision point could come very early on, and I hope the Biden administration doesn't choose to deliver a worse bill and less aid in deference to these antiquated Senate rules with this deeply racist history. I hope that they get rid of those rules, restore the Senate to the way it was supposed to be, and pass the strongest possible aid package for Americans who are really suffering right now.
All right. So you and I share the same aspirations, but I want to get a sense of what you think, how sincere is Joe Biden here? And we should say, as a backdrop to this conversation, and forgive me, I haven't quite matched up the timing, but I know at one point, Harry Reid, when we were looking at the fiscal cliff, I think must be maybe 2010, I think it was, going into there, the Bush tax cuts were sunsetting, and there was essentially advantage and leverage on the Democratic side. Harry Reid wanted to basically call the bluff of the Republicans. The tax cuts were all going to expire, and Democrats could have brought up legislation that said, okay, now we're offering tax cuts. The Bush tax cuts are all gone. Now we're offering tax cuts. Instead, the Obama administration, and from what I understand, the reporting was Joe Biden sort of slid in, undercut Harry Reid's plan, which was essentially undercutting the Democratic leverage, and made a deal with McConnell that essentially allowed them to pay no political price, allowed them to keep a lot of the tax cuts they wanted, did not get the stuff that the Democrats wanted. With that history, and I'm happy to be corrected if I'm wrong on it.
Yeah.
What is your sense as to how much did they learn? How much did they want to learn from that? Is Joe Biden sincere, or is he just basically, this is what we have to do, from my education in the 90s, to pretend to, I guess, Chuck Todd, that we're actually going to try and be bipartisan?
Yeah, I mean, that Chuck Todd point is really it for me. I mean, the senators have to decide if they're in office to please Chuck Todd and to get approval from the pundit class, or if they're there to deliver results for the people who sent them into office. I'm not sure where the Biden administration is going to come down yet. I'm not sure that they're sure. I think that they still think, choosing neither is still an option, that they're going to be able to both deliver big results and do it in a bipartisan fashion. And they're welcome to try that, but I think they have to have a plan B that they're ready to shift into very quickly. If cooperation doesn't work, they have to decide that they're there to deliver results and meet the enormous challenges that we face as a country right now. The fiscal cliff example that you bring up still rankles with me. I was there at the time. And I remember, you're right. Reid drove a hard bargain with McConnell. There was a point where McConnell decided he wasn't getting a good enough deal for Reid, so he went to Biden. And I remember standing in Reid's office at the moment the White House gave him the deal that they wanted Reid to cut. It gave away too much for Harry Reid. This was the wintertime. There was a roaring fire in his fireplace in his office. He just turned to the side and threw the paper in the fire. So this was like, my final answer is nothing. And I think Democrats have to be willing to take that kind of hard line against Republican obstruction. When Republicans fail to deliver on the things that we need, Democrats have to be ready to take the necessary steps to deliver those results themselves.
Okay, so let's say hope springs eternal. Joe Biden is doing this performatively. He knows that Mitch McConnell's not gonna get the deal that they want and that the American public needs. But I'm going to do this. I'm going to placate whoever those voters are in Ohio who want compromise and mythical ones, I would argue. He does that. And so then we're left with this idea of filibuster reform. How willing is it in your mind, and how much power does Joe Biden have to say, A, to Chuck Schumer, hey, look, this is pretty clear what we need here, and you're facing maybe a primary, so you have extra motivation to maybe do this, and I'm going to call Joe Manchin. And like, how much influence does Joe Biden have with Joe Manchin, or how much is it Joe Biden saying, like, Joe Manchin's there, I can't do anything, and so I'm going to have to give away the store to Mitch McConnell?
So Joe Biden has an enormous amount of power here, and in some ways a unique amount of power, unique to him, because he has credibility on this issue with someone like Manchin, and look, I look at this from the perspective of whipping votes, which we had to do a lot in the leader's office. And, I get that Manchin is firmly opposed. He's been very clear about that. But, what you're talking about is a whip list of about, 3 to 5 senators. So to me, I look at that and say, that's not a bad place to start. You're not talking about a whip list of 15 to 20 people. So, you can really focus your efforts on the people that you need to persuade. And Joe Biden, with his history of the Senate, everybody knowing that this guy is about as deep as an institutionalist as they come, if he decides that reform is necessary, he is going to have unique credibility to go to someone like Joe Manchin and say, Joe, listen, you know me. I've tried everything. There is no other option here. We have to do reform. And I think that, combined with other, Manchin's issues, I think he's caught up in ideas of Senate history and reform that I think are incorrect. So I think, helping explain the true origins of the filibuster, the fact that this was not the way it was supposed to be, you combine those kinds of appeals with Joe Biden's unique credibility and persuasion. And I think you see a clear path to getting around a yes. It's going to take time. It's not going to happen right away. But if you only have a few senators standing in the way, I think that someone like Joe Biden is going to be able to persuade them if he chooses that that's what he wants to do.
Okay, so Joe Biden has this sort of like Nixon to China ability to talk to a Joe Manchin. When Joe Manchin says no to $2,000 checks, and then he did a quick 180 on that, good for him. But when he says no filibuster, is he doing that? Is it your sense that he's doing that because I'm a deep institutionalist and this is hallowed ground and I don't want to change the filibuster? Or is he doing that because this is going to mean that maybe some bills get pushed through that aren't necessarily comport with what my donors and my sort of class of people want. And I want that filibuster so that we can't go too far.
Yeah, I think
center of the debate as well.
Right. I mean, that's the thing, is the irony of this is that if you got rid of the filibuster and enabled the Senate to pass things at a majority vote, Joe Manchin will be the most powerful senator in the Senate because you can't get anything passed unless you have his vote. I think that that was not necessarily the case when it was possible that Democrats would control more than 50 seats. But I think now that things have settled where they are and you've got a direct 50-50 split with Vice President Harris breaking the tie, Joe Manchin is empowered by this kind of reform. He can be the deal maker he wants. He can make sure that bills that he's uncomfortable with don't pass. I'm not thrilled about that prospect as a liberal myself, but simply from an analysis of the power dynamics here, a majority rule Senate would put Joe Manchin in the catbird seat and enable him to be a total kingmaker on virtually everything that came to the floor. So I think those are the kind of appeals that over time will hopefully get him to yes.
So if I understand what you're saying is when Joe Manchin said months ago, I would be against the filibuster, he was not contemplating the notion of like, wait a second, I'm vote number 50 and I am literally the fulcrum of the Senate. And therefore, I can get the Joe Manchin Stadium in West Virginia is going to look really good.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's ways to get senators to yes. There's a lot more to his legacy than, filibuster opposition. The other thing is, the road to reform is paved with senators being on both sides of this issue. I mean, Harry Reid said he would never go nuclear. Chuck Schumer, this is part of it's almost a rite of passage for senators to be on both sides of the issue. McConnell pushed to go nuclear and to deploy the filibuster reform when he was the second ranking member of the Republican Senate in 2005, when the Bush administration was making a hard push to deploy filibuster reform. So basically everybody's been on both sides of the issue. I hear what he's saying, but I don't see that as an insurmountable obstacle.
Okay. So lastly, let me ask you this. This notion, and we touched on it briefly, but this notion of particularly this generation of Democrats that maintain the leadership in this party, their perception of who they must placate or whose judgment they must be in proper favor. The Beltway media, folks don't remember around here, but David Broder, that type of animal in Washington. That is, and I say David Broder, and people don't necessarily know who I'm talking about in this room, but that's indicative of maybe this is an era that is over. How much of a generational divide do you see within the context of the Senate, within the Democratic Party, about this particular notion of them having to address, I don't know, that we'd say the Chuck Todds, the Ledley Stalls, the Stephanopoulos, or whoever it is?
You have an entire generation of lawmakers coming up who've never spent a Sunday watching the Sunday shows, and that's not, due to their lack of engagement. They're incredibly engaged and informed, but the Sunday shows just don't set the agenda the way they used to. You have a huge generational divide here. And you look, Biden won the nomination, he won the election. But I think that's sort of papering over the fact that the rising generation of progressive lawmakers, they represent the future. This is an inexorable march of demographics, and they're the people who are going to take the lead in the next iteration of the party. So it is incredibly important with these reform conversations for everybody to know that they have an enormous amount of leverage here. Lawmakers have to listen to them, and they should make their voices clear.
Adam Jentleson, the book is Kill Switch, The Rise of the Modern Senate and the Crippling of American Democracy. It's a fascinating read. I think it's incredibly important, particularly with a 50-50 Senate. I mean, these issues are going to dictate, are going to have such an implication for people's lives on a just a material basis. Very important. Thanks so much for coming on. I would love to have you back to talk more as we see how this is going to plays out over the next month or two, actually.
That'd be great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. All right. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back to wrap some stuff up. We are back. I want to apologize for some of the audio problems we were having during that segment. It is people go through this every day now in their daily lives. A lot of people do anyways, in terms of like school meetings or work meetings with Zoom and whatnot.
We've democratized the audio issue process.
That is right. That is right. All right, let's play this one clip. I mean, there is a lot of people who are feeling some regret, some of which is crocodile tears. And this is the important thing. I mean, let me just reiterate a couple of things that we heard with Adam Jentleson before we play this clip of Ken Langone. Mitch McConnell is sending up a trial balloon. one way or another, he's going to work in the best interest of the Republicans. That does not necessarily mean that just because he does A, that Democrats should do B. But just be aware that that dynamic is going on. Also, be aware that Joe Biden has a choice. He has a choice. He can try getting what he needs to get and have it a bipartisan bill. But if that doesn't work, he has a choice. Does he water it down or does he push for filibuster reform? You just heard a guy whose job it was to whip senators, literally whip, but get them to vote in a certain way. And he perceives this as not an insurmountable hill by any stretch of the imagination. He perceives Joe Biden uniquely well positioned to convince a Joe Manchin that we need filibuster reform. So understand, our politicians are making choices. How you respond to these things. And it's not to say that we all know who Joe Biden is, but we also know that people have a certain margin of potential in certain areas as politicians, and they are influenced by what their constituents say. You don't necessarily have to write them off. Pressure, sometimes you walk a tightrope with this type of pressure. But just be aware of these choices that our politicians are made. And I will also say, that doesn't go just for politicians. It also goes for the billionaire class and the multimillionaire class who fund these political parties. For instance, Ken Langone. You know him maybe as a big financial supporter of Andrew Cuomo's, a big supporter of charter schools. In fact, almost single-handedly responsible for Andrew Cuomo's push for charters in this state. Well, he also was a big contributor to Donald Trump. Here he is talking to Andrew Ross Sorkin on CNBC.
My question to you is, what is your feeling about this today? And as I've asked others, including Mick Mulvaney, as somebody who supported this, do you feel like you enabled it to some degree?
I feel betrayed, okay? Going through the court system to try and get some results, he exhausted everything. It was over. Biden's the president. Biden should be in the White House. And I'll give you a very simple thing, Andrew. I think the biggest mistake anybody can make is to offer mitigating reasons why what happened last Wednesday was a disgrace and should never have happened in this country. And if it doesn't break every American's heart, something's wrong. It breaks my heart, for sure. I didn't sign up for that. And more importantly, I think right now all of us have one, to me, I'm speaking for myself, I'm going to do everything I can from day one to make sure I do my part to make Joe Biden the most successful president in the history of the country. And there's a selfish reason for that. We've got very serious, major issues in America to deal with. We've got the pandemic. We've got the debt. We've got infrastructure. We have a horrendous condition of public schools in America. We have generational theft. What the hell is a guy like me doing getting money from the government every month?
Okay.
Right.
Well, we can rest easy knowing that Ken Langone, the man whose greed has warped him to the point where he's so removed from the consequences of his political donations that he doesn't think that he's in any way responsible for enabling a guy like Trump, which created that yesterday.
Of course. That's like I bought a ticket for the roller coaster, but I only got it for the parts that went up, not down. But let me just go through quickly the list that he's talking about. When he says public education, he's talking about he wants to push charters. When he's talking about debt, he wants to cut Social Security. He said it right there. Why am I getting a government check every month? I'll tell you why. Because it's much easier for the government, much less costly for the government to give everybody a Social Security check and take it back in your taxes. If you want means testing for Social Security, we take more back in taxes. He knows this. This is a guy who's making a pivot. Understand what you're seeing in this moment, folks. There's a lot of people who are going to be jumping off a sinking ship, and they're going to make it like they're doing so willingly, not because they're afraid of getting sucked down to the bottom of the ocean. Be very, very skeptical. We will see you tomorrow. And for those of you sticking around, we will see you right now.
We are seeing you. Yeah.
We see you. We see you.
We actually are looking at all of you. We have that technology here.
We didn't want to reveal that.
Right. Well,
we didn't want to say
because it makes us look
like peeping Toms,
like sellouts or hypocrites.
Peeping Toms. I would say A little bit like that. Folks, we got a lot to cover. I don't know where we are. Matt. Madam Speaker, where are we in terms of the impeachment? Do we know? Brendan, Matt?
Let's see.
Let's take a break.
This is live coverage from the House, so they're still in the House.
We'll figure it out.
We will take a break, head to the fun half of the program. Just a reminder, your support makes this show possible. You can become a member today at jointhemajority.report.com. Also, I wanted to plug these. I have in the past. This is the mask I've been wearing lately. It's an excellent mask. Looks great.
I know. He tried to talk to me with it yesterday on. Can't understand a word he's saying.
It's actually really
good.
But
it seems good.
Really good with my glasses, too, which is a big issue for me. It's got gauze sewn into it. Yes. And it comes, you can buy very chic-looking pouch for it that you can clip on or you can wear a lanyard. It's called, it comes in colors. It is, you can go to comesincolors.com, buy the masks and the clips that comes in, obviously, many different colors. Is that a
Rolling Stones reference?
No, actually, it's a different song. I know that's from the Rolling Stones song, but it's even a different song. I can't remember what, Love Potion or something like that. I'm not sure. But check it out, comesincolors.com, folks. A friend of mine is making these masks, and they are donating a certain percentage to, I can't remember what charity it is, but they do. She does a lot.
It's really a nice mask. I've noticed it looks like, it blocks.
It's very sturdy, and it's comfortable, and it's stylish. There's a lot of stylish masks there. So check that out. Also, don't forget, it's your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajority.report.com. When you do, you support the free show, and you get bonus material virtually every single day. Don't forget, too, we got merch. We're going to roll out a couple of new products in the merch store. That's very, very exciting. Shop.majorityreportradio.com. Also, AM Quickie, amquickie.com. Check it out and get your 7 minutes of headline news every morning. We're getting it out super early these days, like sometimes prior to 7 a.m.
Wow. When do you sleep?
Well, it's not me who cuts it. I just do it late at night sometimes.
Oh, really?
I record it. I don't cut it. Dorsey cuts it.
No, I know. I thought you recorded it very, very early in the morning.
Sometimes we do it that way too. It depends on what's going on with the news. But check it out, amquickie.com. Also, today, my phone fell, so I don't know who's on Nomi's show today. But check out youtube.com/The No McKee Show. You can
Deborah Levitt, Simon Nerode, and Jordan Zakarin. Good job pronouncing things.
There you go. Yes, Check it out. Patreon.com/The No McKee Show or youtube.com/The No McKee Show. And of course, the Antifada, they're doing Twitch streams like 3 nights a week now.
Wow.
Twitch.tv/The Antifada. Check that out. Always good stuff. Matt, last night was the TMBS, the tribute to Michael, his comedic chops.
Yep, the comedy panel that went live on the TMBS YouTube page last night. And tomorrow night, we'll be having a TMBS regular, Daniel Bessner, on to talk about Biden's foreign policy and probably some of his domestic counterterrorism stuff as well. So that's tomorrow night at 7 p.m. at Left Reckoning's YouTube page.
All right, folks, quick break. Fun half. And listen, reminder, if you want to IM the show, just pick up the app, majority.app.com.
Sorry,
iOS.
I was going to sneeze.
Oh, iOS and Android. Majority.app.com. You can IM the show during the fun half, which is about to happen right now. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous? You're a little bit upset? You're riled up?
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2. 5 eighths. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Grandpa.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're not paying.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up.
Ooh.
Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey! Shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
I am now unmuted.
Wow. Good work.
I did it. Colin from Nebraska. Sam, can I get a shofar from my friend who introduced me to your show back in 2016? My good friend Ryan, who went by Cricket, just died of an overdose. Oh, I'm really sorry to hear that, Colin.
That's awful.
Rest in peace, my dude. For all those struggling with addiction of any kind, please reach out for help and please be mindful of what you are buying, or at least watch your dosage. This goes out for Cricket.
So many people struggling right now in so many different ways. And you gotta I'm so sorry for the loss of your friend.
There's also, I should just note that in many states around the country, it is very easy to get naloxone or Narcan or whatever they're selling it at. It's in your area. You can have it in your home. It's very easy. I think now that they even provide it with just a nasal spray, and you literally, if you're around somebody who has an overdose, doesn't happen all the time, but if you are, you can save their lives very easily just by literally having this in your medicine cabinet. So look that up. If you have it in your state, I think many states, it's just very easy to purchase. Worth getting. Yeah. Because particularly, save someone's life. All right, let's go back to the IMs. Emma's Bookie. Hey, so I thought you were just making a typo, but now that Mitch took home the MVP, you owe me. And no, you cannot pay up in tiny orange blimps. I don't even know what that means.
I don't get that, but oh, I do. It's the stupid. So the Bears Saints game was like simultaneously broadcast on Nickelodeon, and they had like slime.
What?
Yeah. And they had
what? Why?
young Sheldon come on and like explain what a false start was, and then they had animated slime going into the end zone. You know, they're trying to make this extremely violent sport more appealing to kids, and so
what are they really putting it on Nickelodeon?
Yeah, and so there was like a Twitter vote for Nickelodeon Valuable Player or something, MVP, and a lot of, you know, asshole adults like spammed it so that Mitch Trubisky would win, and he's not good, so yeah.
What is that noise?
That's me laughing because that is really funny, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Well,
look up
just,
the
like, getting
videos
little-
of it online. It's hilarious. Like the you know, it's like adults doing kid comedy voices as the announcers, you know what I mean? Where they're very eager and enthusiastic and wholesome, like, oh man, they scored a touchdown, the slime 'em, baby.
But you're right. This has to be because of, you know, kids aren't playing football because of CTE anymore, right?
They need to market it, I guess, to
That
kids.
is horrific. God, that
Wait,
is
who owns Nickelodeon? Because
I would imagine it's
Viacom.
Viacom. Well, I mean, yeah. Then it's
That's just
NFL. Yeah,
that should be illegal.
I don't know. Yeah.
MB Steve turned 37 on the 11th. Couldn't help but think of Michael. Rest in power. Left his best. Belated shofar. Happy birthday, MB Steve. Sana Tolp. Remember when protesters found Mitch McConnell at a restaurant? It was the end of political civility. No kidding, right? No kidding. Remember when they said, like, when somebody said that what's her face has a fade on her eye or smoky eye? She had a smoky eye.
Oh,
right. Yeah, that was that was a major scandal.
Sarah Huckabee and the woman from The Daily Show. I don't remember her name. Michelle Wolf.
Yeah, because people interpreted that as a slight on her appearance, and it wasn't. People were just overprotective or sensitive to maybe something like that.
Well, she also wasn't served at a chicken restaurant in Virginia, if you forget.
Oh, all right. Well, that's different because, I mean, what are you going to do?
But it's such projection. Like, you want to make fun of Sarah Huckabee Sanders' appearance. That's why you took that as some sort of slight against her, that she said she had a smoky eye from, like, the ashes of, you know,
right,
burned documents or something like that. That was the joke.
Prairie Fire Kowalski from Nebraska. Hey, Sam, Emma, and MR crew. I want to clear up any confusion from my call a couple of days ago. I do absolutely feel terrible for the loss of life at the Capitol. And my only reason for describing the MAGA mob as an army of incels is to mock them. There's not much you can do to these Trump supporters aside from mock them. Otherwise, they'll get the satisfaction of being important. They are a joke, a dangerous one, but a joke nonetheless. Lastly, when it comes to impeachment by the House, doesn't that prevent any pardons related to the impeachment from happening?
Also, I think that was a good joke. It's fine making fun of them as incels, I guess. As long as just, you know, we're talking about the gravity of what happened as well.
Doesn't that prevent any pardons related to the impeachment from happening? If I'm not mistaken, the Constitution explicitly says the president cannot pardon in the case of an impeachment. I'm not sure I follow what he's trying to say there. Any pardons related to the impeachment? In other words, I don't know exactly what that means, but okay, yeah, okay, I see. There's going to be a lot of debate about, or at least not a lot, but a decent amount of debate. Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 702 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Oh, good to hear from you.
Good morning. Good morning. Yes, there you go. Mm-hmm. Well, that's a good point, but we're going to have to move on. Calling from another 702 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam, it's Bro Flamingo from Las Vegas.
Bro Flamingo from Las Vegas. Or you're a frog doing a great impression of Bro Flamingo.
A frog
from
that's
Las
become
Vegas.
sentient.
Yeah.
Nah, I'm not a white supremacist, so no pepes for me. I just want to say, before I get into what I want to talk about, I just want to say shout out to the chat, you know, like Subversively Surreal and Autumn Leaves, because when I called in last time, a lot of people were asking, you know, could you donate to me or could you help me? I do have a chat because I'm still evicted, but it's a hashtag Bro Flamingo if you want to donate anything. I really appreciate it. I didn't even expect all that, and I really appreciate it, guys. I didn't even know what to say. It really brightened up my day.
I'm glad to hear it.
That's awesome.
Can you talk a little louder into your phone?
Oh, sorry about that, Sam. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, it's still a little low, but go ahead.
Okay. I really liked the conversation that you guys were talking about yesterday when you were talking about, because Sam, because I feel like you and Nomiki are actually, I think you and Nomiki, we're both right in the sense that there's actually a piece about this. In the New Republic, there was a piece by Ben Ehrenreich, I think his name was, and he was talking about magical thinking. In terms of politics right now, like Joe Biden talking about there's this unity talk, Jimmy Dore with the force to vote stuff and just Donald Trump going on with this gobbledygook. But I think, Sam, there's just a lot of disempowerment on the online left. And I understand what you're saying where it's like, you just ignore it and it just goes away, but then it's not a problem until it is. You understand what I'm saying? And I feel like Nomiki has a point. There's just a lot of cranks. And also Kenzo Shibata had a really good piece about how, as the left movement is growing and we're getting more legitimacy and power, which is really good. But at the same time, we're going to have to start getting rid of the cranks, the cranks on the left. I'm talking about the Ryan Knights, the Jimmy Dores, the Nico Houses and stuff like that. Because, when you're out there and you're looking crazy again, it's easy to beat up on Dore, okay? But you just look at him, his eyes are literally popping out of his skull. And, he's going on Tucker Carlson and he's like a useful idiot.
Well,
I'm just talking
about
in terms of optics. I'm sorry, sir. Go ahead.
No. I don't mean to interrupt, but I do think that, look, the part of it is, part of it is just sort of we are moving into an era right now where the job of the left part of the Democratic Party, and at least and perhaps a little bit to the left of that. I mean, I understand the concept that communists and socialists and radicals don't necessarily perceive this their job because they want a completely different system, and that's what their political project is geared towards. But for those of us who are focused on the system as it is and want the best results for people out of that, it's going to involve pushing people like Joe Biden. It's going to involve convincing people and educating people who at first blush might go there should be compromise. Or at first blush, you were like, what are you going to do? Joe Manchin says he doesn't want to vote for the, for filibuster reform. It is about convincing and educating those people as to the reality of the situation. Because just in making people aware of what abilities Joe Biden does or does not have, what abilities a 50-50 Senate does and does not have, a lot of people are going to come to the conclusion of we can expect more. There's, and while I hear you in terms of I don't know that we need to get rid of anybody. I think I think there are some people who I perceive as being unhelpful, whose agendas I think are sometimes are suspect, or who's just sort of understanding of politics is nonsensical. But I think that in this era, those people are going to have a tough time, and they're going to have to increasingly get more, it's one thing the reason why Jimmy Dore had to go after AOC, right, as opposed to anybody else, is because that's all that's really going to be left for him in terms of if he wants to stand out in terms of what he's willing to advocate for. For us here, part of it is obviously our politics. Part of it's also just the way that we approach it in terms of trying to educate people about not just this moment in politics and what is possible, but also a sense of history and an understanding of broader context stuff. And look, we're going to spend, going forward, I'm going to spend a decent amount of time crapping on like, I don't know, the Crowders of the world. But a lot of it's going to be about pushing Biden and making people aware of what he can and cannot do, and making people aware of what he's doing that is contrary to what I think a lot of people who voted for him want. And that's going to make it a lot harder for, I think, like those people on the fringe to sort of, I think to a large extent, they're driven a lot by like, creating an audience for themselves. And frankly, like, I was happy with our audience when it was 5 times smaller than this. And so I'm happy with it today. And we're not chasing an audience. And so also,
I'm sorry, Sam, one thing too, because to add on to that, just to both of your point. Also, I think now, because we've been saying mask off for a long time, okay? And this Capitol Hill riot has really exposed, like I kept saying it before. It's so funny. Last time I called, the Capitol Hill riot happened on the same day. I was talking about playtime is over. And what I've been seeing, and to be fair, this could be an online phenomenon, but sometimes online phenomenons can spill over.
Yeah.
But I saw, like Sam, just people on the left, not talking about punishment of our political enemies, but I also saw them, find a way to somehow, blame AOC and the Democrats for this and all this other garbage. And I'm just like, what is this? It's just completely anti-politics. That's why I feel like I on the whole, Sam, I definitely agree with you, and we have to educate these people, whatever. But at the same time, though, I just think there's like an anti-politics kind of wing of the left where, it's a disempowerment. We're not talking about empowerment. We're not talking about, getting power. We're just talking about, like, and to your point, the personality and, this weird anti-politics on the left. Anyways, yeah. I'll jump.
I'll just add this one last point. It originates from the person saying these things, wanting the cozy blanket of superiority and not behaving in ways that are grounded in reality and actually about building power and looking at things in a complex way. So like what's dangerous?
Absolutely.
Yeah. What's dangerous about it is that it really is just like a insecurity from specific human beings that people who are well-meaning listen to and then think that that's some sort of pure politics when really it's just like, I am trying to project, some sort of strength because I don't have any.
Appreciate the call, bro.
Absolutely. Magical thinking. Take care, guys. Love you guys.
Later.
And it's also, it's weird. There's this, I brought up this guy, David Broder. Do you know who Broder is? Do you remember Broder?
No.
Okay, man, I'm old. But David Broder was sort of like in the early aughts and prior to that, through the 90s, was like the avatar of conventional beltway thinking. And there's, that conventional beltway thinking, it's not as prominent as it was then because there's other media sources. I mean, multiple cable news and, online stuff. But there was this concept of, and Jay Rosen would talk about it too, the communications professor. Like there was a savvy that insider conventional wisdom commentators had. And I can't remember, there was another word for it. Sort of the villagers and this notion of like, you guys don't understand politics. This cannot be worked out. There's nobody has any power here. It's people talk about the horseshoe in terms of politics sometimes, far left, far right coming together. I don't buy that idea so much from an ideological perspective, but from a critiquing perspective, the both siderism that you get from, let's say, Leslie Stahl talking to Nancy Pelosi is in many respects the flip side of the same coin of the both siderism you would get from, like a Jimmy Dore. I mean, the fact of the matter is AOC is not preventing people from getting Medicare. Now, she did not follow the strategy to get to Medicare for all that Jimmy Dore wanted her to, but there is no interpretation of anything in the world where she this sophomore, like literally second term congresswoman who is alienated from a big part of the party because she has been primarying, a lot of those establishment people. There is no calculus in the world that can lead you to believe that she is an impediment in any fashion whatsoever to getting Medicare for all, just as an example. But the idea that you can postulate that means that you are also completely denying, in the same way that those Beltway conventional wisdom pundits would completely deny significant differences between the parties. You're doing the same thing. You're just doing it from a different perspective, but you're really just trying to basically say that you have a level of savviness that, you are telling the unwashed masses that you have no power.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a different way of coming at it. And the fact is that people do have power. In some areas, they have more power than others. Obviously, like I believe that, the capacity to withhold one's labor is the most power that we have in society, but it can only reach that level of power if there has been enough organizing and education of shared, agendas to maximize that power. But even just like awareness in and of itself and what you do with that awareness has some measure of power. These are all, there's a big gray area always. And anybody who's out there denying that there's any type of gray area is disempowering you. And it can come from like the establishment to disempower you. We have, we're completely powerless here. We have help. We're completely helpless. Or it can come from the margins saying you're completely powerless because they're never going to listen to you.
It's the same dynamic as reality TV in the way people watch some reality TV shows in order to feel superior. Like that's a real dynamic. It's similar with and the like, kind of painting politicians as sellouts because then they get to feel like the purer one. It's the same kind of guttural, visceral, emotional, and negative outlook.
But it's not a purity, I don't think, as much as it is a savviness. I can see through these people. I've taken the mask off. I have the ability to see something that you can't see. And it's really, it's a very strange contrarian, but
it's both though, because in the Beltway person you're talking about as well, they believe in the sacrosanct religious nature of two sides coming together and finding the center, and the unwashed masses can't come together and figure something out. Like it is a religiousness about it. Yes. And that's what this ideology, whatever it may be, is bordering on. So I think it is both.
Yeah, I guess I guess when you put it that way, I think that's true.
I changed Sam's mind, guys.
It certainly shaped it.
No.
All right, let's go quickly. Moved on to something else.
I had to have this win after our tort.
After the dram shop thing yesterday.
I don't want to talk about it, even though I just brought it up.
There you go. You should not have brought that up. Speaking of, and then there's the both siderism that you get. That is an attempt to wash oneself of one's responsibility. For instance, here's Representative Ken Buck, Republican from Colorado. It is both sides. Now, remember what we're talking about. We're talking about insurrection against the functioning of our government. And let's listen to Ken Buck first.
And to say that there's one speech or one incident that caused this group of people to storm the Capitol is just not accurate. What I'm trying to suggest to you is that both sides are at fault, and that in America, we need to be very careful of the words.
How did the other side? First of all, you keep saying sides here. I keep telling you, I'm not sure Liz Cheney and Nancy Pelosi are on any sides together. You keep saying both sides. What on earth did any other side do than the side that invaded the U.S. Capitol, where I believe you're sitting right now?
I'm actually standing in one of the House office buildings, but what did the other side do? What you're asking me what Democrats have done? 1 week ago, when the Capitol was overrun,
I don't understand who does the blame for that other than the people who overran the Capitol and the people who may, and whether or not you agree they did or not, the people who spoke before and may have incited that mob to overrun the Capitol.
I love that because Representative Buck, he's like, I'm not really going to prep for this interview. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to do a both sides shtick that usually works all the time. Like, that's what Republicans do to deflect from their own inhumanity and complete irresponsibility, and often what Democrats do to excuse their weakness. He was like, I do this all the time. Here we go. It's both sides. And CNN's like,
John Berman's getting aggressive these days. I've noticed that a little bit.
I like it.
Do we have more of that answer? Because I can guess what he's talking about, but I'm curious as how explicit he got.
I think that might have just been.
If you can make your predictions each, I can find it quickly.
Okay.
What do you think his response is, slash what do you think he has in his mind?
I think we're going to go hit on Antifa. And I think we're also going to hit on the rhetoric demonizing Trump supporters for supporting President Trump because there's a difference in opinion. What do you think?
I think that we're not going to give Brendan enough time because that's exactly what I would have guessed. He's talking about BLM and Antifa.
Yeah.
And he is talking about how, you can't even say that you like Donald Trump or you're going to not be able to get served in a restaurant or something like that. Like, liberals brought this upon ourselves by being so belligerent and so refusing to entertain
intolerant. Maybe he'll hit intolerance.
Intolerance, right? Yes. Do we have more of that interview with Buck and John Berman?
Poor Brendan, we really put him on the spot.
Whether it's an impeachable offense, and what I'm trying to suggest to you is that the level of animosity,
correction with his speech. And then during, when he did not stand up to the people who were attacking the U.S. Capitol, when the video he did release, he talked about how much he loved them. What's your opinion of that?
Wait,
look, I don't think the president, on a number of occasions, has acted very presidential. That's not the question.
Where is? I want to hear that.
The clip started at 8:36 a.m. Eastern time, so you can find it from there. I'm looking at it.
At the same time there. Okay.
Yeah.
Here, the question is whether it's an impeachable offense. And what
I think you get
Pelosi are on any sides together. You keep saying both sides. What on earth did any other side do than the side that invaded the U.S. Capitol, where I believe you're sitting right now?
I'm actually standing in one of the House office buildings, but what did the other side do? What you're asking me what Democrats have done
1 week ago, when the Capitol was overrun. I don't understand who does the blame
the Capitol or the people who are responsible for this action. But what I'm saying to you is that this animosity has been building over the years. It wasn't as if the president gave one speech and all of a sudden people went from a perfectly calm and thoughtful demeanor to this violent action that occurred, which is absolutely shameful. I'm not trying to excuse it, but the actions that have led up to this are typical of this impeachment. What you want to do at this point in time.
I just want to go one last thing, because this is something I know you feel strongly about. You were on the show last week arguing against those trying to overturn the Electoral College. Mike Pence apparently agreed with you. The vice president
deflected. We should have chosen that option.
But the idea, I mean, he also made his own argument against himself by saying that, right, this didn't happen over one. We saw Donald Trump build this resentment over the course of 4 years.
We saw the Republican Party join him in lockstep, his own party. It's amazing the backflips they try to do to get themselves out of being culpable for creating this monster and the subsequent violence that he's also created. But I mean, like,
it's because of the lie about the election. Like, that's what's causing this.
Yes. And they all know, and yet they talk to their colleagues and whisper behind closed doors and say, we know Joe Biden won. And yet they don't understand how they're in any way culpable for the violence that happened on Capitol Hill. Like, if people genuinely believe that an election was stolen by nefarious actors and that their beloved presidential candidate was cheated out of an election and actually won by a landslide, why are people shocked that there is unrest? Like, that's the natural progression of things.
Right. And there's been, and let's face it. I mean, a lot of this is just a resentment, a racial, ultimately at the bottom of it. A lot of it is just a racial resentment because Joe Biden, as absurd as it is to them, represents Antifa and is doing the bidding of AOC.
Mm-hmm.
And we all know, I mean, I think like people should really be clear on this. When we hear them complain about Antifa, it is their way of complaining about BLM.
Yeah.
And their way of complaining about BLM is the same racial resentment that they have had. Like the idea that that black people got a president and then they still want more. They still want, X, Y, or Z, or they want, like they're taking away our privilege. Well,
I mean, we went through it, but
and here's the thing. This is not to say that this dynamic is not heightened by material things that people are dealing with, right? Like, I mean, if you're in a community and your sense that your privilege as a white person is sliding away from you, and you're living in a community which may be going through, a huge number of ODs or job losses, or you're personally, I mean, that can exacerbate it. But I mean, clearly, you cannot look at that crowd of people who had the ability to take time off from work and afford to fly.
Who owns like
DC,
a pool business or
I mean, obviously,
state lawmaker.
That's not the only story that could contribute to it, just as much as like a lot of people got divorced. I mean, like there are certainly material issues here, but I this is at its heart the dynamic between Democrats and Republicans, between largely speaking, Democrats and Republicans at this point is a racial one, both in terms of like just raw voters and in terms of like what has been an ongoing narrative in this country for 400 years.
When you said the thing about how Antifa is their way of going after Black Lives Matter, it reminded me of how when over the summer the protests started going down, the Trump administration first sent their troops essentially to the whitest cities that were protesting in Portland and other like smaller cities they were targeting that had higher white populations because they wanted to couch their racism in and didn't want the images of police, brutalizing Black people because they want that cover. Yep. They want that cover just like that Republican congressman wants that cover, Ken Buck, for giving cover to and allowing for the rise of authoritarianism in this country.
Here is more of that same theme where the Republicans are trying to say that the attack on the Capitol, where people are, and I don't even know you can call this protest. I mean, you come in there and you're coming in with zip ties. It's just not a protest.
You're an attempted kidnapper, insurrectionist.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a protest. Here is Laura Boebert. She is the one who was packing heat in her ad that she put out for herself in Washington, D.C. Also refused to go through the metal detectors that were installed in Congress. There is a genuine concern amongst some of these Congress people that other Congress people, probably people like Laura Boebert, are feeding information to some of these insurrectionists.
That was Ocasio-Cortez's concern. She said she feared for her life in that safe room because of some of the QAnon Congress people that are surrounding her and packing heat.
Exactly. And here's the reality. Regardless of what the laws are in Washington, D.C., in terms of like carrying a weapon, Congress has the ability to make any rule about what members do when they go through the when they go into the chamber. And so Congress has the ability to make rules about decorum, et cetera, et cetera. You don't have all your First Amendment rights in that house.
I know, and
anyways.
wasn't it cops asking them to go through?
Oh, yeah,
wow.
ignored it.
Sounds like some disrespect for law enforcement, man.
Here's Lauren Boebert.
Everybody's jumping on this bandwagon. Anything that President Trump is for, they're coming against, including Second Amendment right. I mean, what recourse do you see the American people, what can they do with our representatives in Congress and our senators to help this not pass?
Always call your senators and your representative with the concerns that you have, or even if you're in support of what they're doing, let them know that. I know firsthand that really does mean a lot to the people who are here in Washington, D.C., to hear from the folks that are home. But, we've seen Democrats for nearly a year normalize violence. It's very unfortunate that they have shown that rioting and looting and violence is an effective tool to advance an agenda. We have Democrat legislators who have been calling for violence. I have a list of 25 quotes from legislators and celebrities who are actually calling and supporting and condoning and endorsing these acts.
I mean,
celebrities, right? Like if Cardi B says something, kind of the same thing as a QAnon supporting congresswoman.
This is like the Tim Pool assessment. On one hand, you have the Speaker of the House calling for something. On the other hand, you have the woman who played Grace in Will and Grace. So,
Yeah, and my favorite Trump-era Republican tactic, and maybe it goes further back too, but I've just been noticing it more, is I have a list, holding up papers. We have a list.
Exactly.
I have a list of 25 quotes right here, right? Can you? Of course, they're not going to ask.
Well, they're from mostly celebrities, and they're in People
them?
magazine.
Read the quotes, because I have a quote for you. What happened an hour before 5 people died at the Capitol? Rudy Giuliani said, "Let's do trial by combat." Right. What could that have meant?
Let's continue.
Want to do quotes, huh?
Who have been calling for violence. I have a list of 25 quotes from legislators and celebrities who are actually calling and supporting and condoning and endorsing these acts of violence. And it's very unfortunate that we've got there here in the United States of America. But we hear the Democrats saying that they are calling for unity. Well, their actions certainly are not calling for unity, not when they're putting together this ready-for-TV impeachment sham that they're running the American people through again, further dividing our country. They are limiting our freedom of speech. They are canceling our platforms. They say if we don't like Twitter's terms and conditions, then go somewhere else. And so we create Parler, and we all get on Parler and communicate there. Well, now Parler is banned, and so it certainly isn't a call for unity to silence half of the population. There are more than 70 million people right now who feel like this.
This verbal diarrhea
Parler is not
exhausting.
banned by no definition. There is no entity that banned Parler. Amazon web servers had told Parler apparently for months, and this came out in the lawsuit, that Parler is suing Amazon for basically saying, no shoes, no shirt, no service. In this instance, Amazon apparently had said, and I think everybody knows, if I will continue to advocate for the breaking up of Amazon into a million tiny little pieces. But Amazon apparently had told Parler, you need to stop allowing violent threats on your platform. Parler said, we don't have anything like that. And apparently, Amazon just said, here's 12 just against our own executives that we have of death threats that you are allowing to on your thing. You're not preventing people from doing that. And be clear, Parler are not First Amendment absolutionists. They could they shut down people. They just didn't shut down the death threats that were being sent from broadcast on their thing. And so Amazon said you're going to issue death threats. Your users are going to issue death threats. You're not going to do anything, but we're going to cut you off. They're not banned.
Yeah.
The Democrats in the House did not ban Parler. That's not what's going on. Like this conflation of, and
No,
this
it's
is,
just-
you know, look,
she
they
just
always
went on a tangent about nothing.
But they all, the right does this. They are mad because the culture in this country has devalued some of their values. And I guess that sucks. Certainly, the society does not embrace all of the values I wish it did, and that sucks. But I don't say that's the reason why we're going to, armed insurrection in the Capitol. I'm sorry that conservative values are not espoused in your favorite TV show. Like, that must suck. Well, but, it's watch CBN.
Yeah,
or whatever.
Time to kill someone, I guess, over that. But obviously, I'm not saying that's what she's advocating. She's not the sharpest tool in the shed. Let's be real. I mean, Brendan just said in the chat she gives you young Sarah Palin vibes. Like, that's absolutely true. It was just this lazy train of consciousness nonsense where it's all just cultural crumbs for the base. Give them a little bit of sweetness for us. Satisfy their sweet tooth is what I mean to say about the nonsense talking points. I mean, there's no grappling with or even an attempt to spin the insurrection attempt at the Capitol. It's just deflect to Democrats. So I don't know what her staying power is, but it is this kind of just complete attack mode where you don't have to grapple with anything at all.
This is, every day, once we got out of the sort of the initial shock of what took place in the Capitol, there was a very limited amount of video that was coming from inside the Capitol, right, that we saw. But more and more keeps leaking out, and more keeps coming out in terms of what different authorities, FBI, the Capitol Police, intelligence, what they were aware of in terms of what the potential threat could be. And the latest element is how much planning was done beforehand and how much help the planning got from actual lawmakers. Now, there's a video out there that shows that these people, a group of them, not all of them, not even 1,000 of them, that, you don't need 1,000, right? I mean, when you have like this mass of people who are willing to follow a bunch of people, all you need is 20, 30 who had at least a reasonable awareness of where everything was in the Capitol building. The video purports to show that. We have reports now from Ayanna Pressley's office that where they barricaded in her office, the panic buttons had been all ripped out. Now, that could have happened sort of between the time that people had broken into the Capitol and it took the time it took for Ayanna Pressley's people to go and barricade themselves in there, although it sort of seems a little weird that they would have gone in, ripped this stuff out in that moment and then left the office. But that's possible. But the fact is that people knew that there were even panic buttons in there to look for to rip out. And
they were communicating with maps of the tunnels in the Capitol building.
Maps of the tunnels.
Just
There's
a riot.
supposedly contact information for Ted Cruz's office was found in one of the vehicles that had like weapons and stuff like that.
The Molotov cocktail guy, the suspect.
And here is Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill from New Jersey on a Facebook Live yesterday with an allegation that I imagine is going to be investigated. Here it is.
Because we can't have a democracy if we have a president who incites violence to overturn the results. We can't have a democracy if too many members of our police force and our military are acting to overturn it and undermine it. We can't have a democracy if members of Congress are actively helping the president overturn the election results. And so not only do I intend to see that the president is removed and never runs for office again and doesn't have access to classified material, I also intend to see that those members of Congress who embedded him, those members of Congress who had groups coming through the Capitol that I saw on January 5th, a reconnaissance for the next day, those members of Congress that incited this violent crowd, those members of Congress that attempted to help our president undermine our democracy. I'm going to see that they're held accountable, and if necessary, ensure that they don't serve in Congress. And so I thank all of you for your support. I thank everyone who's reached out over the last couple days to check in, make sure I'm doing okay, make sure my family's okay. I sincerely appreciate it. Because I know this is a scary time. I know a lot of you are concerned and scared about where this country's headed. But I invite you to join me in my faith in this country. My faith that democracy will continue to prevail. That our children
This is good.
are going to enjoy this.
The pablum. Can you put that that tweet was taken down? There was a pitch.
Yeah, it was taken down.
Okay. And now the big, of course, allegation in that is that there were members of Congress who were bringing people around the Capitol as basically reconnaissance, so that they had an awareness of what was where in the Capitol.
It should not be shocking that QAnon members of Congress are sympathetic to the QAnon insurrectionists. I mean, they may not have known explicitly what was going to go down, but we're getting this drip of information about the complicity of Republican members of Congress in at least an aspect of what happened. Not all of them, but potentially some of them, and it's not confirmed yet. But like, there is, where there's smoke, there's a little bit of fire here. And as we learn more and more, we can't get tired of holding them accountable, because that's going to be key. Like, there are so many different responses to the violence that we saw last week. One of them is Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden asking for more domestic terror laws, which is the exact opposite of what we need. We already have a ton of terrorism laws on the books. We do not need more tools at our disposal to crack down with our police state on terror. And obviously that will be used at one point against Black and brown people in this country. There's not, and left-wing groups, not even a question. The real focus needs to be on holding the powerful people who legitimized this at the very least, and potentially even aided in this.
Yeah, I mean,
accountable. That is the number one focus of the left. That's what should be. Definitely not increasing our surveillance state, please.
I still find it hard to believe that there were members of Congress who provided operational support for this. If that's the case, these people, they need to go to jail. Obviously, and it brings things to a completely different level. But then you do have the culpability of those, senators and frankly congresspeople who voted to not certify this election, knowing full well. Now, look, if they were talking about a specific a moment, like if there was, like, even if there was like a single court case that showed there was even an insignificant amount of voter fraud, I think you could justify voting to decertify in that instance, maybe in the House more than in the Senate, because look, there's a difference.
And
context
you could justify
matters.
it in a court of law.
But there were 50, 60, 70 court cases that were all basically thrown out by all stripes of judges, basically going like, this is not the case. It was certified by Republicans in Georgia. I mean, state after state. Josh Hawley, Ted Cruz, they knew what they were doing. And you make them pay a political price. You make them pay a political price because, not because they miscalibrated, They weren't necessarily looking for people to charge the Capitol building. They were looking to build political cachet. But the fact is, they knew what they were doing was false, and they were playing with fire, and a lot of people got burnt, and they have to pay the price. That's just the reality of it. And they should be kicked out of Congress, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I mean, that's like very valuable information from Mikey Sherrill there. So
we'll see. I imagine that'll be investigated, and but it is quite an allegation. All right, so let's tune into Fox and Friends, as we like to do, at least hopefully almost every day. We like to do it. Sometimes I like to do it twice, because this is the way that, probably the president wakes up every morning, lies in bed, sits there.
This is the way the baby bird gets fed.
Exactly. And here's Fox and Friends this morning, trying to figure out what are we going to say about this impeachment.
Let's, as we have been doing on this show for over 20 years, let's put the shoe on the other foot. If a Democrat president did what happened last week, a week ago today, would the Republicans in the House and the Senate move to impeach him if they could? The answer is yes.
Well, the answer is always yes. Democrats will always go against President Trump, and you had no problem with President Trump up until this week. So what happened?
What you'll hear a lot of conservatives say, though, the ones who are still pro-Trump, don't forget about all.
Let's not blow by this.
Wait, we know what happened. What do you mean, what happened?
No, Kilmeade is asking Ducey, like, dude, what are you doing? This is a little bit of a personal squabble between these two.
I thought that was more like theoretical for Republicans.
Oh, no. I think this is, let's go back. Let's play this again. I think this is Ducey and Kilmeade breaking up a little bit.
Let's, as we have been doing on this show for over 20 years, let's put the shoe on the other foot. If a Democrat president did what happened last week, a week ago today.
He had to go back and say Democrat as opposed to Democratic,
right?
Because he didn't follow the style guide for Fox News.
Frank Lund's talking points. He just spoke colloquially as opposed to strategically for propaganda purposes. How stupid!
He's got to make his point. He's going out on a limb. He's got to make sure he says the rat party. But go ahead.
On the other foot, if a Democrat president did what happened last week, a week ago today, would the Republicans in the House and the Senate move to impeach him if they could? The answer is yes.
Well, the answer is always yes. Democrats will always go against President Trump, and you had no problem with President Trump up until this week. So what happened?
What you'll hear a lot of conservatives say, though, the ones who are still pro-Trump, don't forget about all the good things that he did, the policy, the immigration, the economy,
as we
what
said
he did
before,
for peace in the Middle East.
Brian, what happened last week was the riot and the looting of the U.S. Capitol.
There were so many things that have happened, including the first impeachment, the second, the phone call, this and that. Yeah. There's both sides to this issue, and the bottom line is, in 5-6 days is another president. There is so much to do in the middle of a pandemic. How does it help to impeach someone who's going to be at his resort? It makes no sense. Who is leaving anyway? So a guy's packed, he's walking out of the house, and you go, okay, you're fired. Okay, I've left. How does that help?
I think the members of Congress just want ultimately some accountability.
Karl Rove said,
censure doesn't work.
Rove said even if he's not impeached, he believes this could give the people who don't like his style an opportunity to separate the party from him.
And you could separate all his supporters from the party.
Correct.
Who didn't march who don't march, work 100 hours a week, who say, I'm really proud to have voted for him, disappointed how he acted, but now Mitch McConnell's telling them to go jump in a lake.
That's why.
Yeah, okay, so more than half of Republicans in every poll I've seen think that there was some sort of election stealing that happened. So this is exactly just because every single one of those tens of millions of people didn't show up at the Capitol doesn't mean that they don't exist and doesn't mean that there doesn't need to be a signal said. But like, listen to what Kilmeade said there, because Kevin McCarthy went to Nancy Pelosi, you know, the leader of the Republicans in the House, and said, well, could we do a censor instead? Like, This is how politically toxic Trump is right now. Kilmeade is settling, and Kevin McCarthy are settling for a censure of Donald Trump. That's the bare minimum that Republicans want right now, because impeachment would be such a popular and such the right thing to do, just morally and politically. But that's where he got that from.
What's the
censure? So they're calling for that because that's exactly how bad this is. That's what I'm saying.
The censure in and of itself, calling for a censure, essentially concedes the value of impeachment.
Exactly.
Because if the guy's walking out the door, what difference does a censure do? Well, because it notes in the record that the behavior was inappropriate. And then the question becomes, well, how inappropriate? What if you think a censure is okay, what would it take to reach the bar of impeachment? Is it impossible? If Nancy Pelosi had been murdered, if Mike Pence had been hung, would that have been high enough for impeachment?
Both sides.
I mean, because if the question is that you don't impeach because he's leaving, then you're saying that nothing could have taken place on that day.
He could have shot someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue and gotten away with it, potentially? Is that kind of what you're saying?
I mean, that seems to be the argument. If the argument is it's about the amount of time.
They are conceding he did something wrong. And if Kilmeade and McCarthy are even McCarthy's please, Pelosi, please, we'll make a compromise position. You just censor him. That should tell everybody impeachment is the exact right thing that needs to happen right now.
But Kilmeade's just a little testy, I think, with Ducey. And I don't know. Ducey's going to be joining this show soon. I think it's just a matter of time.
Welcome to the resistance, Mitch McConnell and Steve Ducey, obviously.
So meantime, there's a couple of things that are happening as people walk out the door. On one hand, impeachment. Why would you do that? He's leaving the building. On the other hand, Mike Pompeo has canceled his trip to Europe because the Europeans have basically said, we're not going to meet with Mike Pompeo.
Luxembourg said, you're not good enough for us.
We'll wait.
That tiny country.
We'll wait for the next guy. Yeah. Pass. But we got two things to talk about with Mike Pompeo. One is, you've heard a lot of decrying the idea of how Parler lost its service with Amazon servers, and they'll be back up in about 5 or 6 days when they work out their coding, and so they can be on the servers of some other outfit. And you've heard a lot about the First Amendment issues and in the fact that Donald Trump can't be on Twitter and whatnot. What you haven't heard is that a Republican appointee, Trump appointee at the Voice of America, punished a reporter for asking questions of Mike Pompeo about Pompeo's role in basically delegitimizing the election and promoting an grievance that ultimately led to the death of 5 people in a Capitol insurrection. Here is Mike Pompeo ignoring this Voice of America reporter's question.
What are you doing to repair U.S. reputation around the world? Mr. Secretary, do you regret? Mr. Secretary, do you regret there will be a? Mr. Secretary, do you regret saying there will be a second Trump administration?
Those questions that Patsy Widakusura, I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, asked, ended up getting her reassigned and punished for questioning Mike Pompeo. Now, I'm sure if you go on to the Twitter accounts, you hear the commentary from those people are decrying the assault on the First Amendment that Donald Trump's banning from Twitter got him. Remember, the U.S. government's not doing it. Voice of America is the U.S. government. They are funded by the U.S. government. This is literally an extreme case of a violation of like freedom of the press by the U.S. government.
Is that in the Constitution?
It is. My understanding is it's not. You're allowed to ask Mike Pompeo questions. Here, though, when we're talking about Mike Pompeo, here is something that may be even more relevant, or at least hopefully not. The new head of the CIA, Bill Burns, actually operated the backdoor channel to that basically led to the Iran nuclear deal. There was a backdoor channel out of the limelight so that the Obama administration could do this without...
well, he's a career diplomat, which was a shockingly decent pick by Biden for the head of the CIA, although I'm sure he'll be engulfed in their
who knows?
Horrific bureaucracy at some point.
But the idea is, I think it's at least a signal that Biden is trying to, or at least contemplating, rapprochement with the Iranians. And Mike Pompeo wants to do everything in his power to make sure that doesn't happen. And I would imagine also shoring up his bona fides for a 2024 election because he thinks he's going to run for president.
Crushing, starving, denying the Iranians medicine and food. Good for his chances in 2024 for sure.
Here is a Mike Pompeo saying that Iran, you'll recall, Shiite Muslims, has been harboring Al-Qaeda members, Sunni Muslims.
This sounds very familiar to me, Sam.
Well, if it worked once, why not try it again? Here's Mike Pompeo.
I want to start with a quick story in these remarks today. Many of you here may recognize the name Abu Muhammad al-Masri, also known as Abdullah Ahmed Abdullah. He was Al-Qaeda's worldwide number 2 and on the FBI's most wanted list for slaughtering members of our State Department family in the Kenya and Tanzania bombings of 1998. More than 200 people, including 12 Americans, lost their lives in those attacks. The New York Times reported in November that al-Masri was shot to death on the streets of Tehran. Today, I can confirm for the first time his death on August 7th of last year. The Times wrote, quote, that he had been living in Iran was surprising, given that Iran and Al-Qaeda are bitter enemies, end of quote. It could not be more wrong. It wasn't surprising at all. And more importantly, they're not enemies. Al-Masri's presence inside Iran points to the reason that we're here today. It's what I want to talk about in these remarks. Al-Qaeda has a new home base. It is the Islamic Republic of Iran. As a result, bin Laden's wicked creation is poised to gain strength and capabilities. We ignore this Iran-Al-Qaeda nexus at our own peril. We need to acknowledge it. We must confront it. Indeed, we must defeat it. Now, I know this news will come as a surprise to many Americans. We had Al-Qaeda on the ropes after 9/11, thanks to sustained efforts of our brave soldiers, intelligence officers, diplomats, NATO allies, many others who worked tirelessly to defend freedom. There are far fewer Al-Qaeda operatives in Afghanistan today than there have been in decades. That remains true. This is an enormous tribute to American resolve, American ingenuity, American leadership, and frankly, raw American military strength. That effort drove Al-Qaeda to search for a safer haven, and they found one. The Islamic Republic of Iran was the perfect choice. Al-Qaeda has in fact carried on a relationship to Iran for nearly 3 decades, as the 9/11 Commission clearly established. In the early 90s, Al-Qaeda operatives traveled to Iran and the Bekaa Valley of Lebanon, the heartland of Hezbollah, for explosives training. In the period before 9/11, the Iranian regime told border inspectors not to stamp Al-Qaeda members' passports when they entered or left Iran on their way to or from Afghanistan. This was to help them avoid suspicion when they returned to their home countries.
Okay.
Well, let's just start with this. You'll notice that the only evidence of this nexus that he asserts is that one Al-Qaeda member was killed in that country. Sounds like he was assassinated by, who knows. What's fascinating about this is that it's unclear, like, when they got this information about these assertions, because you would think that if they had gotten these, they had this intelligence, I don't know, 6 months ago, a year ago, 18 months ago, 3 months ago, 3 years ago, that they would have given this speech then, not 4 days before he's leaving office and can't do anything about it. I mean, this is so flimsy, and such garbage. It's fascinating. It's fascinating that, he should be happy about the insurrection only so that people can't scrutinize the absolute BS he's shoveling.
And thankfully, because this comes from the Trump orbit, the media has chosen now to be skeptical about these claims. But imagine the arrogance of somebody who's going to really just recycle the same bullshit that we heard that justified us to get into the Iraq war and just copy paste and apply it to Iran, which we get it. Bolton, Pompeo, and the like have been trying to get into a bloody conflict with for decades and decades at this point. It seems like it's their life's work. Like, that is somebody who believes they're above consequences and above everything here. And this is the second time in the past few months that they've tried to drum up conflict with Iran. Do you remember when the director of national intelligence came out? People forget about this. Said that Iran was trying to influence our elections, provided no evidence about it whatsoever. That just happened. People forget about it because there's never a requirement by the media, not never, but oftentimes they'll just reprint what our intelligence agencies say and take it at face value. But there's been a million other instances about trying to drum up conflict with Iran. Like, I have no faith in the claim that Iran tried to influence our elections. Zero.
I, on the other hand, have no doubt that Iran and probably a dozen other countries, some fashion or another, are, and I guess how broadly you talk about influence, are trying to constantly get information and steer things towards a way that may be more sympathetic to them. I mean, we do this.
We do it to way greater effect.
And we do it significantly more because we have more resources in that regard. But this is what countries do. But that is fundamentally different, in my estimation, from the idea that you're going to gin up this Al-Qaeda stuff. I mean, and I don't think it's going to work. I mean, I just it's just, he's just up there making a bunch of assertions. What they did do was they did put Cuba on the state-sponsored terrorism list, which, again, is just going to involve having to unwind that stuff with the Biden administration. I think what Pompeo is trying to do is just light a bunch of different diplomatic fires around the world so that Biden to just really basically obstruct the Biden administration at the beginning from carrying out, any type of decent agenda. Fortunately, this is the value of the 50-50 Senate, is that, like, on day one, and we should also say that traditionally, you would have confirmation hearings already beginning right now in most administrations. Obviously, we're not getting that in this instance, but that's going to be the advantage of the 50-50 Senate.
And I think it's also just quickly even more ideological than just trying to screw with Biden and make him have to put out a bunch of fires. You get these neocons, they start to believe in the idea of American exceptionalism. I mean, they already, of course, do, but he sees this as his legacy, as flexing American muscle against his enemies around the world. And that's how you get to a much deeper, more insidious obsession because it's a religious obsession, and it allows them to justify atrocities like this and pretend it's in the American interest.
Yeah, I just saw a James in Jersey. Hard to get excited about Al Qaeda when we lose more Americans to COVID than 9/11 daily for weeks.
Yep.
Indeed. Good point. Calling from a 614 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 614. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Is this me?
Yep.
Wait, oh my God. Oh my goodness. I've been trying to call for ages. Hey, Sam. This is Mohammed from Ohio.
Mohammed from Ohio. What's on your mind, Mohammed?
For the longest time, I've been wondering ever since we won the election, if you could ever sort of like give a quick summation, like in retrospect, now that we've been through, of what the Bush administration was in comparison to the Trump administration. Especially since now that we've, for a lot of people, their political awakenings was Donald Trump from a post-Obama world. And for the most part, like people like me were kind of lucid under Bush. We just kind of didn't really know what was going on, but we knew the world wasn't really happy.
I mean, I don't even know if I could give that type of quick summation of the Trump administration, but I can tell you, like, the Bush administration was sort of like a gateway to what we've seen here. They came in. I think they would have been very, very unpopular had it not been for 9/11, and they exploited the hell out of it. They obviously, I think, in some respects, and maybe in the most important respect, the Bush administration was far more well. I mean, I don't even have to provide a qualifier. Bush administration was far more deadly, right, than the Trump administration. I mean, they were responsible for the deaths of, depending on if you want the U.S. government's numbers, hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians. If you want NGO numbers, maybe up to 1 million innocent civilians death. Nobody even refutes the idea of you're talking about 4 million refugees, 2 million outside the country, 2 million inside the country in Iraq. They lied to the American public about the Iraq War, the reasons why, without a doubt. And I think and not to mention like the torture regime and Guantanamo, and they were midwives to Donald Trump and to these lunatics. And fortunately, Donald Trump was, enough. Was not so much that he drifted from Republican orthodoxy, although he did in some areas. It was just more like he was just not the same team. And so the same group of people weren't getting the jobs and the sinecures that they wanted. And he had, attacked a lot of like those establishment folks, the ones who were actually invested in being elected, in the moment, came into line, like Lindsey Graham and Ted Cruz and the rest. But George W. Bush went about the same thing. It wasn't for him. It wasn't immigrants. It was gay people that they chose to demonize for electoral advantage. But they were not as explicit about an agenda to deconstruct the administrative state, but that's what they did. They furthered this notion of like, I mean, there's that's the way I would describe them, I guess. I mean, I don't know what else. I mean, they were a lot more pointed about assaulting things like Social Security. There was an attempt to do that. Privatization gained speed. They were very much like a midwife to the Trump administration, but in many respects, more deadly.
Like, if that's the case, then like, what was different in the transition of like public opinion from Bill Clinton to George Bush, from Obama to Trump? If you get what I'm asking, and like, if it's too big of a question, I guess that's
it's a very interesting question.
What was the difference? I think George Bush ran a very different campaign than the president he became. He ran under this banner of compassionate conservatism. He ran under a banner of like what sounded like a decrease in militarism. So much of the Bush, presidency was defined by 9/11 that you can almost can't make that comparison. There was a intense hatred for Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton did not win his first election with a majority of Americans. He won with the majority of the vote, but it was, he won with a plurality of the vote. People forget this. He only won with 45% of the vote because Ross Perot in that first election in 92 took a big chunk. So there was just an intense animosity towards Bill Clinton. And one which I think was also, they had to become more and more sort of severe because he triangulated and took a lot of their positions. Bill Clinton did. So they had to sort of move to the right of where they were. I think they would have done that anyways. But so I think the big difference is that Barack Obama was black. And I think that, to the extent that you can look at a subsequent event and compare it to an earlier event when that earlier event was, sort of part of building the context of that subsequent event, I would say the biggest thing was, the intensity of the racial resentment. Bill Clinton was considered the first black president, and that's what they called him. I mean, that was like the idea being that he was more explicit in his relationship with the African American community, than I guess any of the prior presidents. I mean, you got to remember, you're only one Democratic when Bill Clinton showed up, you're only one Democratic president away from the Civil Rights Act. Right? I mean, so the idea of tying Bill Clinton to black people was, part of a developing project by the Republicans, and then a black president happened, and I think it's hard to do those apples to apples, assessment, but that's the best I can do.
Right. I was just very curious since, we've talked so much about Obama and Trump since, they are relatively within our decades, and things like the Bush and the Clinton administration are so far away now that, I think people are starting to take a bit more of a sort of a historical critical approach to it. And so it was very interested the difference between the two and whether or not we can kind of learn something from it. So thanks a lot, Sam.
I appreciate
love the show.
Thanks, man.
Thank you, Em, as well. All right, goodbye.
Bye. We just got to wait for Rick Perlstein to write the next, I think, 2 more books in his series, essentially. Calling from an 805 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam, this is Joe from Santa Maria, California.
Joe from California. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hey, man. So I am a print journalist out of full-time work, part of the great dying off of print media that's happened through social media. But I started an online outlet, around the lockdown, and I've been kind of trying to give a progressive left coverage to my area, which, sorry, I'm very nervous, which is, it's a very conservative agricultural area. We're in between Santa Barbara and San Luis Obispo.
Uh-huh.
And let me take a breath really quick. Jeez.
You're doing
I'm
fine,
on the Sam
dude.
Seder show. Okay, thank you. So it's interesting. There has been this response now. We actually had a guy, a nonprofit CEO, who was out at the Capitol Hill attack.
Huh.
And we, So we also, the other thing is we have this conservative radio host named Andy Caldwell, and he ran for Congress, and he's just passing along the Antifa did it defense. That's what they have been continually repeating. And so he brought this guy who actually went there on there, and the excuse is, well, I went there to pray for the country, which I found really hilarious and kind of interesting, because the group that he went with was called the Jericho March. and he had posted the social media Jericho, which, if you know your biblical history, Jericho was the first city to fall. It's the first Canaanite city to fall to Israel, the Israelites. So it's very interesting the pivot that they are trying to do here.
So wait, they're trying to pivot to saying that it was Antifa and that everybody was just praying.
Well, that's what this guy is claiming. He's claiming I went to the Capitol to pray, mind you. I was just there to pray for our leaders and pray for the country.
Can't do that from home, by the way. Can't do that from home, apparently.
Of course not. Of course not. And the kind of weird washing he's doing he's trying to, not get fired. He's trying to save his reputation.
Sure.
I listened to the interview he did with Andy Caldwell, who has the most annoying radio voice. The day of the attack, you'll appreciate this, Sam. The guy he had scheduled on the day of the attack was Joe Arpaio.
Oh my God.
And so, yeah. And so he's like, listen, Joe Arpaio, we have some pictures and it looks like Antifas were there in the crowd and they're the ones doing this.
Is he still pushing the Antifa thing? Because that was what I heard Louis Gohmert and Sean Hannity say on that day. That's also what I heard Mark Levin say. I mean, these guys, the local versions of these guys, they basically more or less pick up off of what the national guys are saying. And, and if they're not directly cribbing from them, they're cribbing from the same place that these guys get it, the town halls and that type of stuff.
Yeah. So he was still talking about it on Friday when he interviewed this local who went out there, who again is a nonprofit CEO. And the group he was going with was the Jericho March, which if you're praying for the country, but he did a social media post the day before that was something like the walls are going to shake or we're going to shake the walls, #Jericho. So very peaceful prayers going on, but it's just fascinating because this area has always been pretty conservative. It's an agricultural area, Santa Maria. It's probably one of the more populous areas, but cities between Ventura and Salinas. And it's becoming a bigger city, but we got that small town feel. And there's always this narrative of, this is a conservative town. But things have been changing. I mean, ever since we got district elections, we got a progressive young Latina, Gloria Soto, on the city council. She works for Planned Parenthood. I never would have thought I would have seen that on our city council. And we had a massive Black Lives Matter rally just after the death of George Floyd, hundreds of people in the streets. And I also documented some Trump people before the election along the side of the road, and we actually had counter protesters.
What's your website? Do you have a website?
Oh yeah, Political Pain is what I go by. PAYNE. My name's Joe Payne. You can find me on YouTube. I do Twitch and politicalpain.com. That's what I do.
All right, great. People can check that out. Thanks for the call. I appreciate it.
Wow, thanks, Sam. Thanks for putting up with my nerves and rest.
No, you did great.
It was awesome.
Thanks.
Oh, thank you. All my condolences for Michael. We miss him every day.
Yeah, thank you. I think, I hope to the extent that there's any momentum, and there will be, but, these things spike and then they drop down to a new level of normal. But I think, what we're seeing is in part a function of Donald Trump in terms of these things, but also I think we're still seeing the implications of Bernie 2016. It's hard for me to imagine that there are young women of color who are not in some measure, who are running for office, who are progressives, who are not in some measure inspired by AOC, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley. I mean, it's hard. I mean, I imagine there could be, but it would be really hard to imagine.
I mean, Cori Bush, who tried once and got it again.
Right.
God, it's so awesome.
And this is all third generation from Bernie, right? You're starting to see this. And
you mean the racist, sexist?
Well, I mean, look.
I'm sorry.
You're right.
Can I just say this one thing? Because it amuses me. That guy baked Alaska? That
Nazi? Of course.
So I think he just snitched on all his little MAGA friends because Vice is reporting that they're using his live stream to identify rioters, but baked himself faces no charges despite storming the Capitol while COVID positive.
Wow.
It's interesting. Why is
he must be blessed.
Jason Bourne music.
I mean, he flipped. He flipped so quickly. I love that.
Baked Alaska has had he seems to go back and forth with stuff, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, like
he pursues attention.
He stormed the Capitol while having COVID and didn't wear a mask. That's all you need to know. And then flipped on all his friends immediately. That's all you need to know about him.
Nice.
I love it.
Call him from an 843 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Yes, this is Jade Maroon from actually from Charleston, South Carolina, but living in Reykjavik, Iceland right now. I'm calling because I'm also part of the Universal Zulu Nation, and sorry, I'm a little bit nervous too. So
you're part of the Universal what nation?
Zulu Nation.
Zulu
hip hop.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, first I wanted to say that I've been listening to you guys for a while. I'm typically working whenever you're playing, so I've never tried calling in before, but I got on, which I'm happy about because I wanted to bring to attention to people about a demonstration on Martin Luther King Day in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. That's for Russell Maroon Schultz. There's been a big push to get him released. He's got COVID, like many of the Black Panther and Black Liberation Army, and a lot of there's still a lot of prisoners, political prisoners that are there, and many of them have COVID. And that's going to be at 11 a.m. in Harrisburg on the 18th, on Monday. And would love to, if anybody hearing this can show up. There's going to be a few car caravans coming from the whole Northeast region, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, obviously, and he was obviously during the time of Frank Rizzo and all of this, and I don't know if you know the history of Maroon, but I also wanted to, if you could promote that would be amazing. And I also wanted to say I'm from Charleston, so I know John C. Calhoun really well. Me and many of my people. I mean, for example, we had the church shooting massacre 5 years ago. I was living there I was back in Charleston at the time, and John C. Calhoun, although it was it was kind of a bittersweet, mini victory or mini small victory, I guess, that they took down statue. I mean, on any other day, it would have been amazing, one of my best friends, Muhyiddin Baha, was murdered, who was leading these protests back after the Walter Scott and the church shooting. So it was a bittersweet, thing to see that come down. I mean, people had been throwing stones at that thing, and I mean, it was so high up in the air. I mean, it was the tallest structure in the whole city. And it was just, and he did so much, along with what you guys were talking about with his racial science. I mean, some of his curriculum is still in universities. I mean, or in some form or another.
All right. Well, wait a second. Let me just. So the protest to get Russell Maroon Schultz out of prison for COVID is where can they get more information? Is there a website?
There's a website. Bear with me just for 1 second.
Is it russellmaroonschultz.wordpress.com?
It's Russell. It's russellmaroonschultz.wordpress.com. Is that what you said?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. But
all right, well, we'll put a link to
that.
that, and appreciate the call.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say also, rest in power, Michael, and thank you, Emma, thank you, Sam, and the whole crew. Jamie, I've been listening to you guys for a while, and love you guys' analysis and from different angles and stuff. So, thank you very much.
Appreciate the call.
Thanks so much.
All right, peace.
From South Carolina in Reykjavik, talking about a protest in Pennsylvania. It's pretty good.
It's online connectivity. That's what it allows for.
All right, final call of the day, ladies and gentlemen. You're calling from an 804 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, is this me?
Yeah.
All right. My name's Chris. I'm calling from Richmond, Virginia.
Hi, Chris.
Chris from Richmond, Virginia. Welcome to the program, Chris. What's on your mind?
Thank you. Well, I've been listening for quite a long time. I think my first show was old Matt's last show. It was like the first time I listened.
Okay.
I've been loving the show. Just became a member last year, and I wanted to call in about the success
charge.
What comes next for the Ken and Ken show?
Wow.
Because that has been a consistent favorite part of the show for me over the years. And I just had an idea the other day with, the current co-hosts of the show that you have, pretty much all being female. Might be a fun opportunity to do like a spoof CNN show, like your character from the old show you did with Michael, got promoted to CNN and now has a show called Mansplain, where you
that
work
actually
with your female
that
coworkers.
actually would be like a good own show, right? Like Mansplain.
Mansplain.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's our feminist show where I correct.
Well,
what
it
they
would
say.
even be better if they had a female in true Fox fashion. You have to have like a black guest to say what's wrong with black people, right? So it would be a female host of Mansplain to talk about why sexism and all these horrible things are actually totally cool and American.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's an interesting idea. I mean, we'll see.
I know. How do you follow up what you guys used to do?
You don't.
way to do
you
that.
don't. You just come up with something different, and part of it is also like when we all get back in studio, will give us time to now so much of it is just like let's get the basic show out there, and so I have a feeling maybe it's not necessarily a April Fool's thing, but who knows for Halloween by then.
Yeah, and you don't want to move away from the roots of making it a day off.
Exactly.
You can't
That's
put too
true.
much
You
effort
don't want to
into
put
it.
too much effort into it. Exactly. Appreciate the call, man. Thanks.
Yeah, man. Y'all have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
you too.
All right, folks, that ends the phone portion of our program for the day. And we will take a couple of IMs and then get up. But I like the idea of mansplain. Or I like you just call it womansplain, and I just do all the talking.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That would basically be the way that you do it.
I think we should play this video, this Mike Neerman representative from Oregon opening the door for protesters in December. Have you seen this video yet?
The Oregon.
Oh, we did. We played that the other day,
We
didn't
played
we?
that the other day.
Oh, did we? Oh, no. All right.
It's okay.
Damn.
My memory is gone when I don't clip these things.
You got Matt-splained.
Yeah. Sure.
You just got Matt-splained.
I think it was the opposite.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Okay.
You got Brendan-splained. I don't know what.
I didn't say anything.
I know.
We got
We-splained?
Sam-splained. That's what happened.
Well, I don't know what to call it. And his nephew. I hope the Biden administration is defined positively by their COVID response. Just the Bush administration was defined negatively by its response to 9/11. I mean, I so much of what the Biden presidency will be about what they do in the first 6 months of this. Are the phones muted? I can't hear anything through the phone line, but the audio is clear through my computer. I don't know what that means. Farouk Milky Way. John Fetterman appears to be running for Toomey's seat. Yeah. What an upgrade, indeed. Also, thank you for the last from the TMBS comedy episode. Michael's laugh is infectious. Peace and love. Yeah, that was really fun.
I am so pumped about Fetterman. We've talked about the road for progressives. Like, Fetterman is the perfect progressive candidate for Pennsylvania at this current time.
Yep.
And he's the real deal. So
more people waiting on the line that can't hear anything. I don't know what happened to that. Dragon Slayer, Sam, please stop satisfying your libertarian itch through your dating apps privately and bring them back onto the show. I don't know what that means. Solovai, regarding Parler, I would be shocked if they're back up in less than a month, even less than 3 months. There are only 3 cloud providers that provide the same service as AWS, and they're banned from all of them as far as I know. They also lost access to a lot of the authentication services they were using. It will be a total application rewrite. If I had to bet, I'd say Becky Mercer cuts her losses on this. Interesting. Calling from Texas, friendly reminder for anyone who received unemployment last year, that money was taxable, and if your state didn't automatically deduct them, prepare for an anxiety attack when you file taxes and see you owe money. Hugo Stiglitz, honest question, how would you guys suggest getting past the most insurmountable divide of family that have somehow become Trump-obsessed and in some cases QAnon, Newsmax influenced? Oof.
I don't know. That's a long question.
Snack the court, Sam M. I really hope you can't see all the Trump bumper stickers that come through this Chicago suburb gas station. Worst is finding out that members of my extended family want to travel to our state capital next week. I'm losing it, bro. Ugh.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, Ohio. Wait, is that where he said? Oh, no, Chicago, not Ohio. I know where Chicago is. I thought it was Ohio for a moment. God.
That's all right. Mark the scientist. Shoot, you can see all of us. Better put my pants on. Pinko, as a member of the Home Healthcare Union, I'm eligible for the vaccine. The union included a link to the Pennsylvania Department of Health to find vaccination locations. When I called 4 doctors' offices in the local hospital, they all told me they don't have any vaccines. I don't know when they'll be getting them. I also don't know the process of dispensing them once they're available. COVID is never going away. There has to be a federal effort. Jay Tingle, Broder was called the dean of the Washington columnists. Indeed. Eventually, he was called out for potentially violating ethics rules by taking speaking engagements on cruises paid for by special interest groups. The incredible aspect of this revelation came from one Washington Post ombudsman, Deborah Howell, who was notorious for glossing over or ignoring the Post's corrupt reporting practices. Both Broder and Howell died shortly after the contretemps. 4 more. Kid tested Politburo, Ariana Grande singing that she lays down heavy. Grande is certainly a violent and threatening statement. Sam, we all know why you won't lease an armed insurrection at the Capitol due to the lavender spray all the cops pack. Be like Mike. People like Paul Ryan were smart enough to save their asses because they saw where Trump would lead their party, but they deserve just as much blame as people jumping ship in this moment. Indeed. Evan from New Jersey, Shapiro, comes out of hiding, comments that everyone he knows owns zip ties.
Yeah, I saw that.
Is that true?
Mm-hmm.
Dude, I got so many zip ties. I got zip ties in this office. I got zip ties at home. I got long black ones. I got short white ones. I got tiny ones. Nobody he knows owns zip ties like this that are cuffs.
They're not zip ties. Like, I know we're colloquially
we call them zip ties, but you cannot buy them at the hardware store.
Yes, they are police temporary cuffs. We called them zip ties because we were using a shorthand so we could talk about the issue. Like
restraints.
Restraints, fine. Yeah.
They're cuffs.
Plastic cuffs. That's what we'll use going forward. Like, he knows this too. It's such specific, nitpicky, like, weaselly bullshit.
Oh, my God. All right. And the final IM of the day. Jonathan Armstead, Sam, you ever think of adding a "you got bad phone" sound drop to the board? It would be useful and immediately let callers know what's up. I don't know what it could be from, though. Maybe the psycho Ghostface killer from Scream. Emma, Matt, Brendan, good job today. See you folks tomorrow. Tune in to Nomi's show right now. Well, at 3 p.m. Stick around for the Nomi Key Show on YouTube, youtube.com/the Nomi Key Show. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie,